Bong Wan is the best chef in the country, with a natural talent and a passionate love for cooking. The dishes he creates have a unique flavor that no one can match. He only serves food to high-ranking government officials who are at the peak of their careers. Suddenly, Bong Wan is falsely accused of wanting to harm a high-ranking official. From that moment on, he loses everything he has built. One day, when the police come to his house to arrest him for investigation, he accidentally falls from a high floor into the swimming pool below. Just when it seems that Bong Wan's life will end forever, he unexpectedly sees a girl swimming towards him. She gives him the most passionate kiss, and Bong Wan jolts awake to find himself in a strange setting. However, what frightens him the most is that he is in the body of a woman who is also the one who kissed him when they first met. It all started a month ago when Bong Wan accepted an invitation to participate in an interview program. He proudly shared his achievements, being the youngest chef to cook for the president. Not only does he have a natural talent for cooking, but Bong Wan is also a notorious playboy, having been with many beautiful women. Today, representatives from the embassy came to meet Bong Wan. They wanted him to prepare a meal for a special guest. However, their requirements were very strict. This guest loves fish, but if he accidentally leaves even one bone in the dish, they would not let him off the hook. Bong Wan was very confident in his culinary skills and chose the most expensive fish to serve the guest. For him, cooking is a joy, and every cut was precise. Once the dish was completed, the serving staff brought it out to the guests. Everyone held their breath, watching the ambassador's expression. He slowly tasted the dish that Bong Wan had prepared, and the ambassador was very pleased with the delicious flavor. Suddenly, the ambassador's expression changed. He pulled a fishhook out of his mouth. Behind him, the secretary smiled maliciously. The staff immediately ran to find Bong Wan for questioning. Hearing the commotion, Bong Wan remained calm, thinking that the ambassador wanted to meet him to express his gratitude. This incident would ruin Bong Wan's career forever. He had no idea that this was a trap set by the sous chef who wanted to destroy Bong Wan's career once and for all. Therefore, he had colluded with the secretary. After being kicked out of the kitchen, Bong Wan sadly hid in his house, not wanting to talk to anyone. Suddenly, two police officers showed up at his home to cause trouble. They wanted to invite Bong Wan to the station for questioning. Bong Wan irritably replied that he had already been proven innocent, as the incident that day was determined to be caused by fishermen leaving a hook behind while fishing. The officer continued to coax Bong Wan to cooperate. In a fit of anger, Bong Wan shouted that the sous chef was the real culprit, but the two officers ignored his explanation and forcefully pushed the door open to enter his house. Bong Wan quickly ran out onto the balcony while they tried to open the door to take him to the station. Desperate, Bong Wan climbed over to the neighbor's balcony, despite the officers trying to hold him back. They didn't want to escalate the situation. Frustrated with the police always making things difficult for him, Bong Wan was suddenly startled when a bird relieved itself on his hand. He lost his grip on the railing, and although the officers tried to grab his hand tightly, it was too late. Bong Wan fell from the height into the swimming pool below. In a daze, he saw the figure of a woman swimming towards him. She swam up and gave Bong Wan a kiss. When he opened his eyes, everything around Bong Wan had changed. He anxiously wondered where he was and gently checked his surroundings. Outside, there were many people kneeling. Bong Wan examined his body and realized that his muscles had disappeared. Worried, he looked at his entire body and sensing something unusual, he ran to find a mirror. What he saw in front of him was the image of a woman. Bong Wan smiled, thinking that he was just dreaming. Suddenly, he felt as if he had seen this girl somewhere before. He remembered the time he fell into the water. It was this girl who had saved him. Just then, a woman's voice nearby startled Bong Wan. It was the maid who had served this body since childhood. Bong Wan was stunned, not understanding what was happening. He gently stepped outside to find a way to escape, but the maid's voice alerted everyone outside. As soon as they saw Bong Wan, they immediately chased after him. Bong Wan tried to run as fast as he could to escape from these strangers. The vast scenery outside overwhelmed him. This place was a palace. Had he really traveled through time? Bong Wan reached to check his belongings, but they had vanished without a trace. He shouted loudly, asking them what they had done to his body. Now Bong Wan realized that things were not simple. He had definitely traveled back in time. The royal physician, after a thorough examination, found no abnormalities, except that the princess's memory had vanished. Bong Wan probed the maid beside him, asking what had happened to this body. The maid said it was all her fault. The night before, after taking care of the princess, the guards suddenly discovered that the princess had jumped into the lake and she had been unconscious for a whole day. Bong Wan speculated that the lake was the portal for him to return, so he requested to be taken to that lake. As soon as he saw the bridge over the lake, Bong Wan ran quickly and jumped into the water. The servants were terrified to see the princess jump in, but unfortunately, the water in the lake had been drained. Bong Wan was furious that he could not return. The servants explained that it was the order of the grand princess. The princess's wedding was approaching, and they could not afford any mistakes. Bong Wan shouted in disbelief upon realizing that he was about to become the king's wife. At that moment, a maid accidentally bumped into him, and in fear, she knelt down and begged Bong Wan for mercy. The loud noise attracted the king's attention, prompting him to summon Bong Wan. Seeing the king calling for him, Bong Wan quickly ran to stand before him. The king was impressed to see that the princess was still full of energy, but when Bong Wan stood in front of him, the king was displeased to see that he was covered in mud. Bong Wan didn't have time to explain. He wanted to ask the king to fill the lake with water, but the king refused. Because the grand princess had ordered the water to be drained, Bong Wan was furious that the king could do nothing about it. He slapped the king hard, and everyone was terrified by his actions. Bong Wan grabbed the book from the king's table, but the king stopped him. Sensing something unusual, Bong Wan pulled with all his strength to get the book back, but he was met with the king's resistance. Taking advantage of the king's momentary distraction, Bong Wan yanked the book forcefully, sending it flying flying into the air. The king panicked at the thought of his secret being revealed, but fortunately, the eunuch standing nearby threw the book into a basin of water. After resolving the immediate danger, the king proceeded into the palace to hold court. The news of the princess's memory loss had reached the grand princess, and the prime minister ordered the royal physician not to leak this information to the outside. Now, many eyes were focused on the princess. The empress ordered the prime minister to find out who was behind it, and the culprit was none other than one of the king's concubines, who had hired a sorcerer to harm the princess. The court session began, and although Cheoljong was the head, he was merely a puppet king. All of the king's decisions were directed by the grand princess. The officials below were arguing about who was responsible for the princess's fall into the lake. To put an end to the debate, Cheoljong ordered that the royal wedding would take place in a few days. After the court session, Cheoljong stayed behind to receive guidance from the grand princess, who did not want him to become a weak and ineffective ruler. At the same time, Bong-hwan was relaxing in the bathtub when he suddenly thought of a way to return. He just needed to jump into the water. However, the servant informed him that the entire pond in the palace had been drained. Bong-hwan was determined not to give up. He tried every place that contained water, but in the end, he still could not return. To survive here, Bong-hwan needed to know what era he was living in. He asked the king's servant what the king's name was, and when he learned that the king's name was Cheoljong, Bong-hwan screamed in fear. He was the most incompetent puppet king in history, a man obsessed with wine and women who neglected state affairs. Every time Bong-hwan saw the king's face, he expressed his disdain. With the royal wedding approaching, Bong-hwan decided to tell the king the whole truth, that he was a chef from the future who had been transported into this body. However, the king did not believe him. Instead, he thought Bong-hwan had simply lost his memory. The king ordered that the princess be taken back to the palace for treatment. Bong-hwan helplessly watched the ignorant king, and following the king's orders, the royal physician began using various methods to treat her, but none of them were effective. Finally, the day of the wedding ceremony had arrived. From early morning, Bong-hwan was awakened by the palace maids, who carefully adorned him in a magnificent outfit. The ceremony took place with great solemnity. However, Bong-hwan still could not remember the necessary rituals. The long period of endurance had come to an end, and Bong-hwan felt relieved to be moved to a spacious room. But the joy did not last long, as the servant informed him that Bong-hwan was to enter the bridal chamber with the king. Faced with a man, Bong-hwan sought a way to escape this dangerous situation. He tried to get the king drunk, but Cheoljong refused, insisting that he wanted to consummate the marriage with Bong-hwan as quickly as possible. Despite Bong-hwan's enthusiasm, the king only drank one cup, and then he began to undress before moving in to embrace Bong-hwan. Things did not go according to Bong-hwan's plan. Suddenly, Cheoljong went straight to the bed, leaving Bong-hwan confused about what he was up to. Seeing the emperor sleeping soundly made Bong-hwan laugh, but he knew he had to be cautious around this emperor. Bong-hwan tried to take a mattress from under the king's bed, but this annoyed Cheoljong. He threw a pillow at Bong-hwan, and then rolled over to sleep soundly. In his dream, Bong-hwan saw Cheoljong being attacked by a stranger. He was startled awake, only to find that Cheoljong was nowhere to be seen. The group of servants joyfully entered to congratulate Bong-hwan, and it was only then that he realized his clothes had been removed. Bong-hwan was unsure whether he had taken them off himself while sleeping. At the same time, an assassin had infiltrated the royal palace, carefully hiding in the storage room. Outside, the eunuchs were coming to attend to the emperor. Today was the first day Bong-hwan officially became the crown princess, and he was curious about what the crown princess was like. While walking down the road, Bong-hwan unexpectedly encountered a very beautiful girl. He ordered the palanquin to be lowered and approached the lovely girl to introduce himself. Just then, a maid rushed over, surprised to see that the person in front of Bong-hwan was actually the young lady from the Gajin family. There were rumors that this very young lady had pushed the princess into the pond. After assessing the situation, Bong-hwan calmly approached the young lady and expressed his desire for them to become friends. The young lady was cautious about this unexpected invitation and declined the offer to be friends with Bong-hwan. At that moment, the emperor arrived. Upon seeing the emperor, the young lady's eyes lit up. Bong-hwan felt uncomfortable interrupting this couple, declaring that he would not attend the promotion banquet. However, Cheoljong insisted on taking Bong-hwan with him. Angered, Bong-hwan left, ignoring the emperor's words. Now, only the emperor and the young lady remained, and he began to sweetly flirt with her. The emperor said he should have married her, but some people had seen the young lady near the pond and suspected that she was the culprit. Seeing the worried expression on her face, the emperor promised to protect her at all costs. The young lady felt happy receiving a flower from the emperor. At the same time, in the palace of the crown princess, Bong-hwan did not know who the crown princess was. Following orders, he bowed and paid his respects to the person sitting on his right, but unfortunately, that person was not the crown princess. Bong-hwan quickly corrected his address, flattering the crown princess for being so young that he did not recognize her. This made the princess sitting next to her uncomfortable, and Bong-hwan sensed the rivalry between the two. Suddenly, the crown princess mentioned that she had a way to conceive a son, and everyone listened attentively to her method. Bong-hwan blushed at the thought that his mother-in-law was such a vulgar person. The crown princess became angry when Bong-hwan interrupted her, and the meeting between the three of them finally came to an end. Bong-hwan then went to the royal palace where the king was working, and inside, the ministers were already waiting. Bong-hwan was in awe of the splendor of the palace. The emperor ordered the court session to begin, and one by one, the civil and military officials presented themselves to the princess. Bong-hwan recognized the various factions present in the court. According to historical records, the Kim family was known to be the pests that ruined an entire dynasty. Finally, the head of the Kim family appeared, and Bong-hwan was curious to see what he was up to. The head of the family used the princess's name to manipulate the emperor, and Bong-hwan Wan was completely unaware of his plans. His only goal was to survive in this era. At that moment, the crown princess ordered the emperor to take action. Cheoljong struggled to suppress his anger and compromised with the head of the Kim family. He used the excuse of the princess's health to end the banquet. On the way back, Cheoljong kept bringing up the wedding night from the previous evening. Wan denied that he had only drunk wine and gone to sleep. Cheoljong suggested that she should check again, which left Wan in a state of extreme confusion. Could it be that he had lost his virginity the night before? After today's meeting, the crown princess had a different impression of Wan. She felt that the princess was a cunning person, but she still had a somewhat positive impression of Wan. At the same time, the young lady Hua Jin was being conferred the title of noble consort by Wan. After completing the formalities, Wan took Hua Jin's soft arm. As soon as the servants left, Wan began to inquire about the emperor's words, wondering if the two of them had truly consummated their marriage the night before. However, Hua Jin felt that Wan was boasting about being the main wife. Before leaving, she told him that the emperor was not lying. Wan held his head in discomfort at this harsh reality. That night at the villa, a group of assassins launched a surprise attack, stealing all the confidential documents along with a large amount of gold and money. At that moment, the guards discovered the theft and signaled an alert. The assassins quickly fled the villa, and the guards immediately pursued them. Unexpectedly, a woman carrying her child happened to cross their path and got caught up in the chase, causing her to drop her small child. The sound of the crying baby caught the attention of one of the assassins, who turned back to save the child, disregarding the dangers he would face. After rescuing the child, the assassin returned to his hideout, only to reveal that his true identity was Cheoljong. Cheoljong's goal was to find an item in the treasury, but he found nothing. Now, there was only one possibility left. Perhaps it was hidden in the villa of the head of the Kim family. While he was deep in thought, Wan entered. The emperor did not want to talk to the princess, so he tried to decline, but Wan was not concerned. She only wanted to know what the two of them had done the night before. The emperor smiled knowingly, implying that things had progressed with Wan. Wan painfully accepted the harsh reality, noticing that his princess was becoming increasingly unserious. The servants conveyed the order from the crown princess, and now Wan had to attend a class on etiquette. He felt uncomfortable not being able to move freely as before. These formalities did not suit him at all. While enjoying a meal, memories suddenly flooded back into Wan's mind. Memories of this body. Did the original owner of this body truly have feelings for the emperor? However, Cheoljong's gaze was filled with disdain, which was also the reason the emperor did not want to consummate their marriage on their wedding night. Putting that reason aside, Wan felt a sense of joy that he had not yet lost his virginity to some man. After finishing the lesson, Wan had to pay a visit to the crown princess. Seeing Wan being obedient pleased the crown princess. This time, Wan came to ask the crown princess to refill the water in the pond, but the crown princess strongly opposed the idea. Wan felt that the crown princess was a stubborn old woman, so he proposed a condition. If he could bear a son for the emperor, the crown princess would have to refill the pond with water. The deadline for this deal was set at 7 days. At the same time, Miss Hua Jin came to see the crown princess. She handed the young lady a protective talisman, which was supposed to help her conceive a son. However, the young lady declined this good intention, as she had no intention of vying for the throne. That night, when she returned home, she recalled the night she had pushed the princess into the pond. Noticing the young lady's poor complexion, a servant inquired about her well-being. The young lady warned the servant not to let any gossip reach others' ears. Meanwhile, Wan was trying to approach the emperor. He wanted to ask Cheoljong to help him outsmart the crown princess, but the emperor refused his request. Wan was furious to encounter this crazy king. He decided to use his last resort. He immediately loosened his clothing, startling the emperor, which forced Cheoljong to comply with Wan's words. After Cheoljong left, Wan quickly disguised himself as an ordinary citizen. A servant advised Wan to return before curfew, or he would get into big trouble. Wan was touched that someone treated him kindly, but in the servant's memory, the princess was a strict person with everything. Many people had been punished by the princess. Wan was surprised by what the servant recounted and promised that from now on, he would treat everyone better. As soon as he stepped outside, Wan was unexpectedly spotted by a young nobleman. Noticing the expensive clothes he was wearing, Wan guessed that this was a wealthy young master. He flattered the nobleman to deceive him, and since they were both in the same situation, they decided to stick together. The young nobleman boasted about his connections with the emperor, and eventually, they arrived at the gate. The guards, upon seeing the nobleman's token, bowed their heads in fear. However, when it was Wan's turn, they looked at him with suspicion. Sensing something was off, Wan put his arm around the nobleman, which made the guards fearful and allowed both of them to leave. As soon as they successfully escaped outside, Wan knocked the nobleman out and went alone to the pleasure house. Despite having disguised himself carefully, Wan was still discovered to be a woman. However, with his hefty purse, Wan was able to enjoy a night of revelry without worry. At the same time, in the next room, the emperor was having a meal with his trusted brothers. They reminisced about their past hardships, while the emperor was secretly preparing a plan to eliminate the corrupt officials. What they lacked was the position of the chief guard general. They needed to find the ledger. Once they had it, the emperor would have full command of the army. Just then, a loud noise erupted as Wan stumbled in, drunk. Everyone was surprised by the uninvited guest. Through the hanging curtain, the emperor recognized the familiar face, and at that moment, Wan realized he was late. He immediately ran back outside. The trusted subordinates angrily said they needed to quickly silence the princess, otherwise, their plan would fall apart. The emperor stood up in anger, stating that Cheoljong would personally handle this threat. Cheoljong grabbed his sword and ran to find Wan. Wan felt terrified as he saw the sword-wielding figure figure approaching him, and the emperor coldly drew his sword, pointing it directly at Bong Wan. However, the emperor still had doubts about whether Bong Wan had overheard anything. Just as the emperor was about to strike, Bong Wan suddenly shouted loudly, "You will regret this." Then, Bong Wan handed over all the money he had to the thief. The emperor thought Bong Wan was trying to stall for time. Feeling that the thief didn't want his money, Bong Wan decided to intimidate the thief, saying he was a chef for the special forces, and that if he wanted to fight, he should come at him. The emperor was annoyed by Bong Wan's nonsensical talk. Just then, a sword flew in and knocked off the emperor's mask, revealing his face. The emperor quickly used the hem of his robe to cover his face. Before Bong Wan could fully process what was happening, a young nobleman appeared, and the two quickly clashed with their swords. Cheoljong found himself at a significant disadvantage, fighting with only one hand. Watching the fierce battle between the two, Bong Wan excitedly cheered them on from the side. The nobleman calmly analyzed his opponent, noting that the emperor's face was his weak point. Enraged, Cheoljong charged straight at the intruder, using the terrain to dodge his opponent's attacks. A lantern fell gently, and the sound of metal clashing pierced through the lantern. Just then, the emperor's subordinates arrived, quickly distracting the nobleman to allow the emperor to retreat. The nobleman, furious, immediately chased after the thieves, but they had vanished without a trace. Now, only Bong Wan, who was drunk, lay slumped by the roadside. The loud commotion had attracted the attention of the soldiers. The nobleman introduced himself as Byong-in, the son of a high official. Upon hearing his name, the guards immediately sheathed their swords and bowed in respect. Byong-in ordered the soldiers to pursue the thieves, then approached to check on Bong Wan, wondering why they dared to act so boldly. Meanwhile, the soldiers had approached a tea house where the emperor's trusted subordinates were inside. The two of them worked together to deceive the soldiers, as they were all officials in the court, which made the soldiers hesitant to investigate further. Once the soldiers left, the subordinates reported back to the emperor. They suspected that Bong Wan had learned about the entire plan and was intentionally setting a trap for the emperor. However, Cheoljong did not think so. It seemed that Bong Wan had merely stumbled upon the situation. The emperor needed to verify this matter. At the same time, Bong Wan was escorted into the palace by Byong-in. Byong-in ordered the guards not to disclose this matter to anyone. After that, he carried Bong Wan back to her room and instructed the maid to take care of the princess. Looking at the lovely face of his little sister, Byong-in recalled a memory from a day of heavy rain when the princess had run away and cried alone. It was Byong-in who had thoughtfully cared for her. It turned out that the owner of this body did not want to become the king's wife. She just wanted to live peacefully. Seeing his little sister in such pain made Byong-in feel heartbroken. For a long time, he had harbored feelings for the princess, but fate had separated them onto different paths. Just this once, Byong-in gathered all his courage and gave the princess the most passionate kiss. A new day began, and because he had drunk too much the night before, Bong Wan was not feeling well. The maid carefully fed him a little, but Bong Wan was not in the mood to eat. The maid recounted how Byong-in had brought Bong Wan back the previous night. Bong Wan smiled upon realizing he had someone backing him up. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He wanted to eat modern dishes. Therefore, Bong Wan ordered the chef to prepare noodles according to his preferences. The chefs in the royal kitchen were among the best in the country, but none of the dishes could satisfy Bong Wan. The head chef was going crazy as Bong Wan criticized every single dish mercilessly. It was just a simple bowl of noodles, yet it seemed to torment everyone involved. Frustrated, Bong Wan decided to go to the kitchen himself. He quickly got the hang of the tools available, from the stove to the perfect temperature. The maids felt worried, as the princess had never stepped in the kitchen before, but inside this body was the legendary chef Bong Wan. The head chef looked down on Bong Wan, thinking that someone like the princess knew nothing about cooking. Bong Wan smiled as he picked up a chef's knife, skillfully spinning it in his hand, which startled everyone. He began to prepare the dish, and as he sliced the vegetables thinly, everyone gasped in amazement. Bong Wan started mixing the ingredients to create the seasoning, and each movement exuded elegance. This only made the head chef feel humiliated. After all, the princess was just making it look more beautiful than he did. Who's to say the flavor would be any better? The arrogant head chef tasted the broth that Bong Wan had prepared, and the explosion of flavor made him drop his spoon. It was the first time he had ever experienced such a fresh and delicious taste. The perfect blend enhanced the noodles, and for the first time in history, beef noodles were born. Bong Wan was satisfied as he enjoyed the dish he had cooked, while the maid standing beside him looked on enviously, wondering how the princess could cook such delicious food. Just then, the emperor appeared. Upon seeing him, Bong Wan gestured for him to stop so he could finish eating. The emperor smiled and inquired about what had happened the night before. Bong Wan was surprised that the emperor knew he had been drinking. Suddenly, the emperor moved closer and asked, "Why is the princess so good at lying?" Bong Wan felt angry at the interruption of his delicious meal. On the way back, the emperor, feeling annoyed, asked what exactly the princess had eaten. Just as the emperor left, Byong-in appeared. Bong Wan was surprised when Byong-in spoke sweet words to him. Although he didn't understand much, Bong Wan played along with Byong-in. Byong-in felt guilty for not being able to protect the princess and advised Bong Wan not to trust anyone. Bong Wan also became aware of his current situation. After Byong-in left, Bong Wan was lost in thought about his words. He needed something to win people over to his side, so he decided to use cuisine to win their hearts. At that moment, a palace maid brought food to the queen. Curious, Bong Wan lifted the curtain to take a look, but the head chef stopped him, not wanting Bong Wan to touch his food. Bong Wan felt annoyed at being looked down upon, so he challenged the head chef to see who was truly the best. The head chef thought the princess was joking and intended to walk away, but Bong Wan provoked him further, asking if he was afraid of losing to him. The head chef, furious, accepted the challenge. The bell signaling the start rang out, and both chefs began to showcase their knife skills. They were both culinary culinary masters, and the crowd outside cheered enthusiastically. Finally, the dishes were nearing completion. Contrary to the head chef's hurried demeanor, Bong Hwan gently rang the bell to signal the end of the competition. The head chef, unwilling to accept defeat, wanted to taste which dish was better. Bong Hwan pointed to the boy in the blue outfit to taste his dish. As soon as he took the first bite, he couldn't resist the delicious flavor. The head chef, angry, pointed and asked, "Who are you?" He thought he was addressing Bong Hwan, but he was actually pointing at a child who dared to be there. However, Bong Hwan understood that the head chef was cursing at him. Under the pressure from the princess, the head chef finally admitted defeat. From now on, Bong Hwan would be in charge of the kitchen. At that moment, a servant came to announce that the emperor was visiting. Bong Hwan felt annoyed that Cheoljong kept bothering him. It turned out that the emperor still didn't fully trust Bong Hwan and wanted to test him a bit. However, Bong Hwan was not interested in what the emperor had to say. He mentioned that Byung-in had stopped by that morning, which made the emperor worry that he might have been exposed. But based on Bong Hwan's demeanor, the emperor decided to sleep with Bong Hwan that night. They both carried their own burdens. The emperor fell into a deep sleep without realizing it. In his dream, Cheoljong saw someone being dragged in front of him, and his scream woke Bong Hwan up. Bong Hwan was furious when Cheoljong suddenly hugged him. He tried to push the emperor away, but Cheoljong was determined to stay right there. A new day began, and Bong Hwan looked dejectedly at the emperor in front of him. After finishing their meal, Bong Hwan went to the archery range with Lady Hua Jin. However, Bong Hwan had no idea how to shoot arrows. He quietly mentioned that he had slept with the emperor but didn't do anything, which made Hua Jin uncomfortable. Bong Hwan began to suspect whether Hua Jin was the one who had pushed this body into the lake. Hua Jin was not an ordinary person. She was cunning and scheming. Her words troubled Bong Hwan. To relieve his tension, Bong Hwan went to the royal kitchen. He curiously asked how many meals the queen had in a day, but the head chef was reluctant to answer. Angrily, Bong Hwan declared that he would take over the kitchen. The head chef, frightened, said that the queen had many meals, which surprised Bong Hwan. There was a lot of leftover food, indicating that the queen was hiding something. At the same time, in the barracks, the emperor's trusted guards were planning to investigate Bong Hwan. They decided to drug the wine, and after obtaining the vial of poison, the guards handed it to the emperor. The plan was set to take place that night. The sky gradually darkened, but Bong Hwan had not yet returned. Bong Hwan ordered the kitchen to build a new oven, along with the finest cooking oils. He began to showcase his culinary skills, putting his fate into each dish he prepared. The subordinates were left in awe as they witnessed the unusual cooking methods of the princess. After marinating the seasonings, Bong Hwan placed the fish into the oven. The high temperature would bring out the best flavors in the dish. Ignoring the fact that the emperor was waiting for him, he wanted to personally watch over the cooking. As the sky began to brighten, after a sleepless night, the delicious fish was finally ready. The queen was surprised to learn that Bong Hwan had personally prepared the dish. It was as beautiful as a painting, which moved the queen deeply. At the same time, Bong Hwan was worried about whether the queen would be satisfied. Just as he was about to go meet her, she burst through the door, shouting loudly, which frightened Bong Hwan. He thought the plan had failed, but the queen's attitude suddenly changed to a warm one. She was very pleased with the dish that Bong Hwan had prepared. Bong Hwan explained each step of his cooking process, and the queen was delighted by his culinary knowledge. From that moment on, Bong Hwan had the queen's support. The first task was to fill the pond with water, but the work did not go smoothly. To solve this issue, Bong Hwan came up with a new method. He instructed the servants to line up and form a human chain for transporting water, which helped increase productivity and reduce the time needed for the task. At that time, a rumor was spreading throughout the palace that Hua Jin was the one who had pushed the princess into the pond. The news also reached the ears of the eunuch who served the emperor. However, the eunuch chose to remain silent and observe. The emperor also noticed that the eunuch was hiding something from him, as he had been serving him for 2 years. The emperor asked the eunuch if he trusted him, and just as he finished speaking, the emperor threw a dagger past the eunuch's head. The eunuch was terrified and fell to the floor. Today, the emperor decided to visit Bong Hwan earlier than planned, and he also prepared a grand feast. Bong Hwan wondered what the emperor was planning, and when he caught a familiar scent, he suddenly remembered the assassin who had attacked him. Could it be that the emperor was the one who had attacked him? Bong Hwan was frightened and looked straight at the man in front of him. The emperor had already prepared to draw the dagger he had hidden on his person. In Hig, if Bong Hwan showed any sign of recognizing the emperor as the assassin, Cheoljong would immediately take action. Just as the emperor was about to make his move, Bong Hwan suddenly changed the subject. The emperor quickly hid the dagger, and it turned out that he had been keeping a close eye on Bong Hwan to see if he remembered anything from that night. Taking advantage of the distraction, the emperor secretly added poison to the teacup. Bong Hwan carefully examined the cup of tea that the emperor had poured, and a sense of danger washed over him once again. If he wanted to survive, Bong Hwan had to pretend that he didn't know anything. Suddenly, Bong Hwan dropped the teacup, suspecting that the emperor might have poisoned the tea. He cautiously handed the cup to the emperor, who smiled, accepted it, and took a sip. Unexpectedly, the emperor leaned in to kiss Bong Hwan to transfer the poison. Bong Hwan immediately struggled and tried to vomit, but the emperor stopped him. He claimed that he was innocent, stating that if the poison were to take effect, the tongue would feel numb first. To gain Bong Hwan's trust, the emperor willingly became a hostage in her hands. After a while, a wave of drowsiness hit Bong Hwan. This was the effect of the drug. He tried to escape but was blocked. The emperor asked what Bong Hwan had done that night. In his dazed state, Bong Hwan revealed the whole truth. However, when the emperor heard that Bong Hwan was misunderstanding him to be involved with someone else, he breathed a sigh of relief. Bong Hwan did not stop there. He continued to scold the emperor, telling him to go ahead and kill him if he wanted. Faced with Bongwan's unwavering attitude, the emperor angrily left the room. Seeing the emperor return, the closest guard approached to inquire about him. The emperor admitted that he had made a mistake. He lacked the confidence to confront the strong, so he had taken out his anger on the princess. Meanwhile, the emperor's direct enemies were investigating the origins of the fabric. The vendor claimed it was high-quality fabric, only used in the palace. At the same time, a group of criminals was wreaking havoc in the capital. Under the cover of night, they broke in and captured the maid of the young lady from the Jisang house. The scar-faced man wanted to know who had pushed the princess into the pond, but the maid only shook her head, saying she didn't know. The sound of her painful screams tore through the night. A new day began, and the investigation into the origins of the fabric by Byung-in had been reported to the emperor. This situation was extremely dangerous. Although Byung-in had burned the clothing, he still kept a piece of it. While they were talking, a eunuch entered, and his probing gaze made the emperor feel uneasy. The only person who knew the emperor's true identity was Bongwan, and in order to live peacefully in the palace, Bongwan decided to keep that secret. At that moment, the grand princess summoned Bongwan. On his way to meet her, Bongwan accidentally crossed paths with the scar-faced man, who was a subordinate of the main antagonist. This time, the grand princess summoned Bongwan because she needed his help. She entrusted him with the full authority to select a princess for the emperor. Matters in the palace were becoming increasingly complicated, and Bongwan needed to win the grand princess's favor until the lake was filled. Ever since she had tasted the dish prepared by Bongwan, the grand princess could no longer eat food made by anyone else. Therefore, Bongwan had to personally prepare the meals for the grand princess. Bongwan ordered the chef to pour out all the rare milk. At that moment, a little girl ran in, and the head chef was furious at the interruption caused by a child. However, Bongwan called the girl over to inquire about her. Learning that she was hungry, Bongwan took some food for her, and in return, the girl would help Bongwan peel potatoes. However, the head chef intervened, stating that traditionally, women were not allowed to work in the kitchen. This made Bongwan uncomfortable, as time was running short and he needed to start preparing the meal. All the chefs gathered around to watch Bongwan showcase his cooking skills. The exquisite dish made from milk and potatoes was completed, and when the grand princess tasted the food prepared by Bongwan, her mood improved. However, there was one aspect that left the grand princess dissatisfied. The dish had cooled down due to the long serving time, and Bongwan needed to address this issue. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He needed to create a food tray, and the artisans in the palace were the ones who could accomplish this task. After assigning the work to them, Bongwan went to check on the lake. However, the water level was still low. To boost everyone's morale, Bongwan called the head chef to prepare a refreshing drink. Bongwan then relaxed by the lake, observing everyone as they worked. At the same time, Miss Hwa-jin was very worried because she couldn't find her maid. Just then, the grand princess entered and told her that the only person she could trust was herself. That was the only way to save the maid. Immediately, Hwa-jin informed her people to prepare. Meanwhile, the emperor was taking a stroll. To shake off the eunuch following him, the emperor had someone block his path while he went to a secret location. This was where Hwa-jin had arranged to meet the emperor. Seeing the worried expression on Hwa-jin's face, the emperor reassured her. To extinguish the flames of revenge, the emperor decided to surrender. Hwa-jin pleaded with the emperor not to do so, but he no longer wanted to run away. The emperor himself would put an end to this entanglement. The emperor's trusted guards began to take action. They needed to find the scar-faced man who was infiltrating the palace. Meanwhile, Miss Hwa-jin had decided to sacrifice herself to protect the emperor. Hwa-jin knelt before the grand princess. Inside, the main antagonist was happily enjoying the food, unaware that the emperor's subordinates were infiltrating the place. Their objective was to find Hwa-jin's maid, and Hwa-jin's confession meant that the maid had lost her value. At the same time, the emperor had arrived by the lake, angrily questioning Bongwan about what he had done to Hwa-jin. Bongwan completely did not understand what the emperor was talking about. After the emperor left, Bongwan learned about the events happening in the palace. The power struggle was heating up. The grand princess finally came to meet Hwa-jin. Hwa-jin pleaded with the grand princess to release her maid. Gaji mentioned that on the day the princess fell into the lake, Hwa-jin was also present there. Instead of revealing the truth, Hwa-jin claimed that she had pushed the princess into the lake. By the time the emperor arrived, it was too late. The grand princess had gathered enough testimony to accuse Hwa-jin. She ordered that Hwa-jin be dealt with as an example to others. Faced with the blade of fate, Hwa-jin stared angrily into Bongwan's eyes. Suddenly, the emperor knelt down and pleaded with the grand princess for mercy. Seeing the emperor's bravery made an impression on Bongwan. Just as the emperor was about to speak up, Bongwan signaled him to stop, and all eyes turned to her. According to Bongwan's calculations, the lake would be filled tonight, but she did not know that the well had run dry. Therefore, Bongwan wanted to be the hero who saved the damsel in distress. She stepped forward, knelt before the grand princess, and declared that she had jumped into the lake herself. Everyone was taken aback by this revelation. Meanwhile, the emperor's subordinates had found the hideout of the scar-faced man. They immediately launched an attack and rescued the captured maid. The grand princess was furious when Bongwan ruined her plan. To make her words more believable, Bongwan took out a letter she always carried with her. At that moment, Hwa-jin suddenly fainted. To eliminate any suspicion against herself, Bongwan pretended to lose consciousness as well. Suddenly, the emperor stepped forward, causing Bongwan to feel frightened. frightened. She silently hoped that the emperor would step aside. Just as she predicted, the emperor approached and picked up Hwa-jin to take her back, unwilling to let the woman he loved suffer. Byung-in also rushed forward to carry Bong-hwan, surprising everyone with this action. In this battle, the Grand Prince's side had lost. Bong-hwan was then taken back to the residence, feeling the pain of those around her. In light of the harsh truth, she didn't dare to wake up just yet. The sound of crying grew louder, making Bong-hwan uncomfortable. It took a while for Byung-in's group to finally leave. Byung-in reminisced about the memories with the princess. That girl had once been very cheerful, but now, as a princess, she seemed to be increasingly suffering. Bong-hwan's defiance had enraged the Grand Princess, and she wanted to punish Bong-hwan severely. Suddenly, the Grand Princess recounted the night the princess fell into the lake. It turned out that the princess had come to see her to request to leave the palace. However, she had been refused by the Grand Princess. Perhaps that was why the princess chose to jump into the lake. At the same time, Bong-hwan was having a nightmare. He saw the Grand Princess blocking his path, and the water in the lake had been completely drained. Overwhelmed with fear, Bong-hwan woke up. According to his calculations, today was the day he could return. Bong-hwan sadly said goodbye to the servants and ran to the lake. As soon as the servants saw Bong-hwan appear, they were terrified and knelt down, begging for mercy. The well had run dry, making it impossible to fill the lake with water. Bong-hwan was frustrated that his return was being delayed, but he still wanted to try. The servants immediately blocked Bong-hwan, not wanting him to jump into the lake again. Annoyed by their interference, Bong-hwan ordered the servants to wade into the lake to check the water level. The water was currently only up to their knees, not enough for Bong-hwan to return. Now Bong-hwan had to face the consequences of his actions. The Grand Princess, furious, summoned Bong-hwan to punish him. Expecting to be severely punished, Bong-hwan was surprised when the Grand Princess took all the blame upon herself. She asked Bong-hwan if he hated being the king's wife so much that he was willing to give up his life. Bong-hwan didn't understand what she was talking about. To escape the awkward situation, he claimed to have forgotten everything. The Grand Princess was annoyed that Bong-hwan, having no memory, still dared to show up, which she considered an act of defiance. To appease her, Bong-hwan began to play the victim. He knew very well that the life of this body was very valuable. They only wanted to consolidate their power in the palace. Therefore, Bong-hwan felt free to manipulate the Grand Princess. The final boss sitting beside them silently observed and asked Bong-hwan if he truly wanted to leave the palace. Bong-hwan replied that he wanted to live in this place. The Grand Princess did not believe his empty words, so she would give Bong-hwan one last chance. If he showed any defiance again, he would face dire consequences. After pardoning Bong-hwan, the final boss summoned the scar-faced man. The scar-faced man trembled with fear every time he stood before the final boss, knowing he had failed in his mission. The final boss gave him one last chance, warning that if he failed again, he would face a fitting punishment. Meanwhile, Cheoljong still couldn't understand why Bong-hwan saved Hwa-jin. Why would she do such a thing? The king recalled the night before the princess jumped into the lake. He was the one who had rejected her feelings, which had hurt her deeply. Now, Cheoljong felt guilty, but the guards believed the princess had other intentions. To clarify the situation, the king needed to meet with the princess. At the same time, Bong-hwan was worried about being in a dangerous situation. If he were to blame someone, it would be Cheoljong. As soon as he saw the king's annoying face, Bong-hwan unleashed a torrent of insults at Cheoljong. It was the king himself who wanted Bong-hwan to leave. To soothe Bong-hwan, the king approached to embrace his wife. However, Bong-hwan rejected him. The king realized that he had angered the princess, so Cheoljong decided to return. As he passed by the lake, the king was surprised to see Bong-hwan having the lake filled with water. However, there was someone who worried the king even more: Miss Hwa-jin. Now that Hwa-jin had regained consciousness, the king hurried over to hold her in his arms. Hwa-jin felt happy to receive the king's attention. Suddenly, Hwa-jin asked her maid how she was doing. The guard reported that the maid was receiving treatment. Hwa-jin sighed in relief upon hearing the good news and immediately ran to check on her maid. Despite her pain, the maid tried to appear strong when she saw her master. Hwa-jin, in anguish, asked who had done this to her, but the maid had not seen the face of the perpetrator. Unable to stay in the palace for treatment, Hwa-jin arranged for her maid to return home. A new day began, and early in the morning, rumors spread throughout the palace about the discord between the king and the queen consort. The officials aligned with the queen consort openly looked down on the king, showing no respect for Cheoljong as their ruler. At the same time, in the royal kitchen, Bong-hwan was trying to learn how to sew. The chef, noticing Bong-hwan's clumsiness, made a mocking remark. Just then, the meal prepared for the queen consort was returned. Bong-hwan felt satisfied that the queen consort could not eat the other dishes, as she had become addicted to the meals he cooked. To relieve his frustration, Bong-hwan decided to cook and then have someone deliver the dishes to the queen consort. The queen consort was surprised by Bong-hwan's new trick. The food was transported in a tray that Bong-hwan had designed, which kept it warm. The queen consort enjoyed the delicious meal, and just as Bong-hwan had predicted, he was able to win her favor through his tasty dishes. Food and dining in the royal court were very important. Many years ago, when the late king was still in power, a decision to judge someone from the faction of a notorious bribery lord had escalated the feud between the two sides. They were the very ones who had poisoned the late king. It was the first time Hwa-jin had heard about these events, and she recalled the evening she met the queen consort. The queen consort had known Hwa-jin's Huajin's weaknesses, and they both understood each other's true natures. That was also the moment the queen consort decided to jump into the lake. Now, thinking back on it, Huajin felt a sense of fear. The sky began to rain, and everyone in the royal kitchen quickly tidied up the ingredients. Meanwhile, Bongwan sat back, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. Suddenly, the head chef mentioned that it would rain heavily tonight. Bongwan was delighted that the lake would finally be filled. To celebrate this joy, Bongwan decided to go outside and dance in the rain. This scene was inadvertently witnessed by the king, who felt a stir of emotions at the sight of Bongwan's beautiful figure. The king quickly approached to shield Bongwan with an umbrella and then offered an apology. However, Bongwan paid no attention to this and told the king to go away, as she would be returning to her old world that night. The lake was full, and while everyone was sound asleep, Bongwan quietly said goodbye to everyone and left. Finally, he could return. Before jumping in, Bongwan signed his name on a stone and then carefully checked the depth of the lake. Gathering all his strength, he jumped into the cold water. However, nothing happened. Bongwan sank to the bottom of the lake, and unexpectedly, a man jumped in to pull him up. Bongwan gradually realized that the man was the king. Bongwan was furious that someone dared to interrupt his attempt to return. The emperor was furious when Bongwan dared to leave this world by her own like that. Bongwan attempted to jump into the lake again, but the king firmly stopped him, unwilling to lose him. The king believed Bongwan could still live a happy life. Furious, Bongwan shouted in frustration as the king stubbornly refused to understand his words. Unbeknownst to Bongwan, when the king noticed his unusual actions, he had ridden his horse at full speed toward the lake. Upon reaching the lake, the king was terrified to see Bongwan's clothes and the message he had left behind. Without a second thought, the king plunged into the lake to save Bongwan. At that moment, Bongwan's subordinates arrived. The king ordered them to escort Bongwan back to the palace. Bongwan was still shaken after jumping into the lake. If the king hadn't saved him, he might have died by now. Bongwan couldn't understand why he couldn't return to his original world. Could it be that the lake wasn't the gateway between worlds? Desperate to find a way back, Bongwan carefully revisited every clue from the past, especially regarding the identity of the body's original owner. It was clear that the owner of this body had been trying to escape from something. What on earth was going on? He just wanted to go home. Suddenly, an idea struck Bongwan. He decided he needed a complete ritual to resolve this. He asked if there was anyone in the palace who could perform such a ritual. The servant informed him that there was only one person capable of doing it, the queen. The queen was surprised when Bongwan came to see her. Could it be that he was trying to expose her for using charms and spells? Faced with Bongwan's series of innocent yet persistent questions, the queen ordered the servants to tear down all the talismans on the walls. She then asked who exactly Bongwan intended to summon. Bongwan vaguely replied that he needed to summon someone very important to him. The queen grew wary of Bongwan's cryptic answers and chose to remain silent. After Bongwan left, the queen became suspicious, wondering if Bongwan had someone backing him. On his way back, Bongwan couldn't understand why the owner of this body wanted to leave this world by his own. Suddenly, a thought struck him. If he had traveled into this body, could the original owner of this body have entered his real body? The mere thought of his body flirting with other men sent shivers down his spine. Bongwan became frantic. He tried to hurt this body in an attempt to make a statement, but it was all in vain. A maid consoled him, assuring him not to worry, as he would surely find a way to return. Bongwan, refusing to give up hope, performed a soul-calling ritual upon returning to the palace. However, there was no response. Suddenly, a servant entered the room and handed Bongwan a book. When Bongwan opened it, he was annoyed to find love letters from the king. The incident of falling into the lake had left Bongwan with a cold. But it wasn't just him, even the king had also fallen ill. The king grew anxious when Bongwan still hadn't responded to his letter. The storm had yet to pass. Elsewhere in the palace, the maidservant of Lady Huajin was trying to reveal the identity of her captor. Just as she was about to approach the guards, a scar-faced man appeared and blocked her path. Ruthlessly, he stabbed her to silence her forever. Watching the maid fall to the ground in despair, the scar-faced man quickly fled the scene. Meanwhile, the queen went to meet Huajin. She was curious about what Huajin's painting would depict next. Gently, Huajin added a budding flower to the artwork, hinting that she had yet to decide whom to follow. The queen smiled and ordered her servant to present a gift to Huajin. Inside was an expensive set of bows and arrows. However, this was not the real gift. The queen revealed that the true gift would be sent to the king during today's royal court assembly. Today was also Baeongyeon's first day as an official in the royal court. From early morning, Baeongyeon had prepared everything meticulously. He recalled Bongwan's words, and as he looked at Bongwan's handkerchief in his hand, he vowed to rescue Bongwan from the king's grasp. Standing face to face with his most dangerous rival, Baeongyeon couldn't hide the hatred on his face. The king, however, remained composed as he officially appointed Baeongyeon to his position. In stark contrast to the king's calm demeanor, Baeongyeon brazenly criticized the king's governance, particularly regarding internal power struggles. The entire court was shocked that Baeongyeon dared to speak to the king in such a manner. Yet, the king's expression remained unchanged. He showed no signs of threatening the officials, or perhaps more accurately, in the eyes of the corrupt ministers, the king was nothing more than a puppet. Meanwhile, Bongwan was enjoying a meal by the lake. He was trying to adjust to living in this body. Little did he know, in the royal court, the ministers were plotting to depose him from his position. Despite some objections, the majority of the officials distrusted Bong-hwan, especially after his repeated attempts to jump into the lake. The king, growing furious, shouted at everyone to be silent. He refused to approve the petition. Byung-in was surprised by the king's resolute attitude in defending Bong-hwan. After the court session ended, Byung-in went to inform Bong-hwan of the news. Before he could say a word, the king appeared behind him. The atmosphere between the two men grew tense, radiating a sense of confrontation. Byung-in harbored no fondness for the king, while the king remained steadfast, declaring that he would protect Bong-hwan at all costs. Bong-hwan, however, had no idea what the two were talking about. To ease the tension, Bong-hwan jumped between them, questioning why everyone always wanted to depose him. Byung-in, having something to discuss privately with the king, waited outside. When only the two of them were left, the king revealed that he would proceed with a secret plan. Suddenly, the king knelt before Bong-hwan and handed her the hairpin she had left by the lake. Lowering himself, the king earnestly asked Bong-hwan to give him a chance. Bong-hwan felt a chill run down his spine at the king's cheesy words and quickly ran back to the palace. Outside, Byung-in was watching the two with jealous eyes. The king noticed Byung-in's unusual demeanor and sternly warned him to know his place and never overstep his boundaries. A little later, Bong-hwan went to meet the queen dowager. The prime minister was also sitting and conversing with the queen. Bong-hwan saw this as a perfect opportunity to shift the pressure onto the queen. He asked her for more time, promising to prove his abilities to everyone. The prime minister revealed that today the king had defended Bong-hwan, which surprised him. Finally, the queen dowager agreed to let Bong-hwan act freely. Without hesitation, Bong-hwan summoned the young men and women present in the palace. He was planning to organize a large-scale event. The rumors spread quickly throughout the palace, becoming distorted and changing unpredictably. This pleased Bong-hwan. The rumors reached the queen dowager, causing significant losses to her faction. Now, everyone viewed Hwa-jin as the villain. Furious, Hwa-jin declared that she would report the matter to the king. However, the queen was uncertain whether the king would listen to Hwa-jin. Hwa-jin then went to meet the king. Contrary to her expectations, the king recounted everything that had happened in the court. Hwa-jin realized that the king was still supporting her, but despite their close relationship, they had never been intimate. The king understood Hwa-jin's feelings and, to reassure her, promised to visit her that night. Hwa-jin then went to see Bong-hwan. The servant informed her that Bong-hwan had a severe cold, but when he saw the beautiful woman arrive, Bong-hwan changed his attitude. He pretended to be well in order to receive Hwa-jin. At the same time, Bong-hwan ordered all the servants to leave the room. When only the two of them were left, Bong-hwan happily walked up to Hwa-jin, which made Hwa-jin uncomfortable. Bong-hwan, however, shamelessly approached Hwa-jin, reminding her that it was he who had saved her from danger. Hwa-jin had come because of the rumors spreading throughout the palace. Now the two of them seemed to be on equal terms. Hwa-jin coldly stated that she would be with the king tonight, which made Bong-hwan feel disappointed. Clearly, it was Hwa-jin that Bong-hwan was interested in, not that boring king. However, Hwa-jin remained unmoved. After informing Bong-hwan, Hwa-jin smiled and left. That night, Byung-in invited two high-ranking officials to discuss matters. They were all rivals, and a heated argument quickly broke out. Just as one of the officials was about to leave, Byung-in angrily threw his chopsticks at him. Faced with Byung-in's intense threat, the official obediently sat down and listened to what Byung-in had to say. It turned out that Byung-in wanted to exchange a letter in order to obtain the petition to depose Bong-hwan. Faced with the great benefit, they agreed to cooperate. At the same time, the king's most trusted guard arrived to discuss matters. The idea of deposing Bong-hwan was a good opportunity. Why was the king hesitating? The king explained that it was Bong-hwan who had saved his life, and that's why he was acting out of gratitude. The guard asked if the king was willing to betray them, demanding that the king swear an oath. If Bong-hwan changes her attitude, the king himself would be the one to dispose of her. Without hesitation, the king agreed. Meanwhile, Bong-hwan was sitting in the royal kitchen, sewing. He had decided to open a shop right inside the palace. The king himself sent a congratulatory letter, but upon reading it, Bong-hwan angrily threw it into the fire in front of him. Suddenly, a new idea came to Bong-hwan's mind. Bong-hwan was unaware that the queen dowager had invited a sorcerer. After performing a ritual, the sorcerer discovered that someone was inhabiting the body of the lady, and that person was none other than Bong-hwan. In his real world, a stranger approached and removed Bong-hwan's breathing tube, causing his soul to vanish. Everyone was terrified when they saw Bong-hwan collapse. In his own world, doctors were desperately trying to save Bong-hwan, but he showed no signs of life. Meanwhile, in the other world, while on his way to meet Hwa-jin, the king accidentally noticed a servant calling for the royal physician. Upon inquiring, he learned that Bong-hwan had fainted. The king, worried, quickly rushed to the royal kitchen and found Bong-hwan unconscious on the floor. Angrily, the king asked what had happened to Bong-hwan. The servant speculated that Bong-hwan might have been poisoned, but the cook said that Bong-hwan hadn't eaten anything. No one knew the cause of Bong-hwan's collapse. At that moment, the royal physician arrived and immediately checked Bong-hwan's pulse, declaring that it was not the pulse of a living person. Bong-hwan's eyes had turned completely white. The royal physician concluded that Bong-hwan was in a critical state, potentially on the verge of death at any moment. The king, enraged, ordered the physician to save Bong-hwan at all costs. The physician quickly prepared a prescription for treatment. The king personally carried Bong-hwan back to the palace. What the king didn't know was that all of this had been orchestrated by the queen Dowager. The very sorcerer the queen had invited had expelled Bong Hwan's soul from the body, intending to make it disappear forever. The sorcerer demanded that an exorcism ritual be performed, but it was a dangerous task with a high risk of being discovered. At the same time, Bong Hwan's soul had returned to his original body. He was overjoyed to finally be back, but when he saw the doctor's attitude, he began to worry. Clearly, he could see and hear everything, but the doctor concluded that Bong Hwan would be in a vegetative state. No matter how hard he tried to call out to the doctor, no one could hear his screams. A while later, 2 police officers came to visit Bong Hwan, but they didn't hear his voice either. While they were chatting, Bong Hwan overheard the presidential secretary was up to something suspicious. Suddenly, a force pulled Bong Hwan back to the other world. It turned out that the royal physician had used acupuncture to awaken Bong Hwan. Bong Hwan, furious, grabbed the royal physician, but when he saw the king, he was surprised to find the king there. After that, Bong Hwan fell into a deep sleep. The royal physician said that Bong Hwan had temporarily passed through the critical stage. The king's presence made Hua-jin furious. Once again, Hua-jin had missed her chance. Hua-jin hurriedly went to meet the Queen Dowager, determined to personally defeat Bong Hwan once and for all. Meanwhile, the servants were giving Bong Hwan medicine, and the king personally stayed to take care of him. The king recalled the times he had treated Bong Hwan poorly. It was clear that he had been moved by this woman. Bong Hwan's danger reached the ears of the Queen Dowager and the Prime Minister. They knew very well who was behind all of this. None other than the Queen, who had always been in opposition to them. At this moment, the Queen had managed to pull Hua-jin to her side. After receiving Hua-jin's agreement, the Queen prepared a ritual. They intended to make Bong Hwan's soul disappear forever. The minister immediately ordered Byung-in to lead the troops to raid the princess's residence. Tonight, they would make sure the princess paid the price. Byung-in, furious, broke down the door and stormed in, followed by none other than the Grand Princess. She angrily shouted at the princess, demanding to know what she was doing. The princess, terrified, claimed she was performing a ritual to pray for peace and prosperity. Byung-in ordered someone to bring out the talisman found in the palace. The princess, in fear, denied any involvement. The Grand Princess, furious, ordered the guards to point their swords at the sorcerer. Despite the sorcerer's pleas, the princess refused to step forward and take responsibility. Trembling, the sorcerer said he would perform a ritual to lift the curse, but the Grand Princess no longer needed it. Bong Hwan had woken up, which surprised the sorcerer. This was impossible. The Grand Princess shouted angrily, questioning why he would believe such a fraudulent sorcerer. Byung-in had sent people to search the imperial kitchen, where they discovered traces of arsenic in the food. That was the reason Bong Hwan had fainted from poisoning. In the past, the former king had also died from arsenic poisoning. The Grand Princess angrily scolded the princess, and then ordered the punishment of those responsible for the incident. Trembling, the princess clung to the Grand Princess's feet, begging for mercy. In order to survive, the princess revealed a secret about the emperor to the Grand Princess. Byung-in would personally verify the matter. Angrily, he stormed into the room where Bong Hwan was resting, stating that he needed to take Bong Hwan to a safe place. He showed no concern for the emperor, which made the emperor uncomfortable. Byung-in claimed that the Grand Princess was the one who had harmed Bong Hwan. Despite the emperor's disbelief, the evidence that Byung had gathered implicated the Grand Princess. Byung-in tried to find a loophole with the emperor, and just as he was about to step inside, the emperor ordered him to stop. However, Byung-in's subordinates drew their swords, threatening the emperor. Furious, the emperor grabbed a sword and pointed it at Byung-in, saying, "If you don't stop, I will strike you down right here." Byung-in was surprised by how much the emperor cared for Bong Hwan. The emperor slowly turned toward his subordinates and loudly proclaimed, "I am the king of this country. Who are you? Are you my soldiers?" The subordinates, terrified, sheathed their weapons. Just then, the emperor's trusted bodyguards arrived, threatening Byung-in to leave before blood was shed. Calmly, Byung-in responded that he had been investigating under orders from his superiors, but the emperor had never given such an order. The emperor, furious, demanded to know who had commanded him. Seeing that Byung-in still refused to relent, the emperor stepped closer to him and said, "Bong Hwan is my daughter. I will personally take her home." With no further reason to stay, Byung-in immediately ordered his troops to withdraw. The true power that the emperor had been hiding for so long was now exposed. The emperor immediately summoned his guards to return to the palace, as they needed to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Byung-in was still investigating the piece of cloth taken from the assassin. It was a rare item only nobles possessed. A eunuch had seen the guards burn a similar coat, and the mysterious assassin was about to be revealed. However, Byung-in's thoughts were focused on the princess. Seeing his younger sister unconscious saddened him deeply. In a moment of emotional overflow, Byung-in slowly approached Bong Hwan, but he dared not act rashly, as their identities had now changed. The emperor then went to meet Hua-jin, warning her to be cautious in the coming days. The palace was now a dangerous place, and everyone was concerned about Bong Hwan. Although she had passed through the critical stage, Bong Hwan had yet to regain consciousness. But what worried the chancellor even more was the emperor's true nature. Initially, the emperor had been given the throne to make it easier for the chancellor to manipulate him. However, after what happened last night, the chancellor needed to investigate further. Meanwhile, at the princess's residence, Bong Hwan had regained consciousness. She was astonished to find herself surrounded by pure gold. The servants were overjoyed to see the princess awake. Bong Hwan inquired scared about what had happened, and after understanding the situation, she prepared to face new troubles. Bong Wan's father had invited many royal doctors to examine her, and he had also prepared various nourishing dishes for her recovery. Byung-in, worried about her, had frequently visited. This time, he presented the piece of cloth to Bong Wan's father for inspection. This cloth was only given to the Grand Princess. However, recently, his warehouse had been robbed. That night, the emperor ordered an investigation into the corrupt officials. It was not only Bong Wan's father who was involved, but the chancellor was also the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. Each of them had their own secrets to hide. Whenever the emperor had free time, he would secretly go to his training ground. They needed to quickly improve their strength. His closest bodyguards continued to train the special forces, with one of them holding a gun. From now on, they would be nameless, armed with great power. With just a light pull of the trigger, they could send their enemies straight to the afterlife. After training, the two had to return to the palace without anyone noticing. Unexpectedly, they ran into the chancellor, who keenly observed that the rabbit the emperor had caught was unharmed. The emperor laughed, saying he had used a trap to catch it. Suddenly, the chancellor mentioned that Bong Wan had regained consciousness. The emperor immediately set off to visit her. On the way, seeing the peaceful world and the happiness of the people made the emperor feel delighted. Meanwhile, Bong Wan still had no idea that the emperor was on his way to visit her. After fainting, Bong Wan noticed something strange about her body. It felt as if her true voice had vanished, as though she had merged with the body she now occupied. Bong Wan was overwhelmed and confused, unsure of what was happening. Seeing Bong Wan's chaotic state, the maid became frightened. Bong Wan decided that from now on, she would live for revenge. To accomplish that, she needed a strong ally, and the first person who came to her mind was the Grand Princess. Suddenly, Bong Wan caught a strange scent in the air and followed it to a secret storage room. Inside, there were countless priceless treasures. Bong Wan ordered that everything in the storage be packed and brought to her palace. At that moment, a servant rushed in to announce that the emperor had come to visit Bong Wan's health. As soon as Bong Wan saw the emperor, she showed clear disdain. However, the emperor didn't seem to mind. Holding a bouquet of flowers, he approached her, and the petals floated in the wind, creating a romantic scene. Bong Wan stared blankly, not understanding what was happening. Suddenly, the voice of the empress echoed, revealing that now, within this body, two distinct consciousnesses existed. On one side, it was the empress's consciousness, and on the other, it was Bong Wan's. Seeing her bouquet being brutally thrown to the ground made the emperor feel heartbroken. Just then, the empress's father appeared and bowed to the emperor. Seeing the two of them appear to be close, Bong Wan wanted to return to the palace as quickly as possible. However, her father held her back. The three of them entered the house to talk. The emperor carefully observed the surroundings of the room. The empress's father began to recount his daughter's childhood, and the emperor, understanding protocol, listened attentively. However, Bong Wan was not interested in continuing the conversation. Suddenly, the emperor tightly grasped Bong Wan's hand, expressing a desire to go for a walk around the house. The father, feeling anxious, excused himself and went to prepare. He then led the emperor out. As they walked, the emperor carefully examined every detail, even noticing the servants who were trying to remain unnoticed. The father led the emperor to his study, where there was a beautiful screen. The emperor expressed interest in examining it more closely. Just when the old man wasn't paying attention, the emperor quickly moved to look behind the screen, causing the old man to feel uneasy. He tried to stop the emperor, but it was too late. The emperor had already discovered a hidden secret room behind the screen. The emperor questioned whether there were guards at night, but the old man claimed that it was a secret and couldn't be revealed. The emperor expressed concern for Bong Wan's safety, prompting the old man to disclose everything in the manner. Happily, the old man led the emperor on a tour. However, when the emperor saw a well, he became suddenly fearful. When the emperor was young, to escape from his enemies, he had to hide alone in a deep well. This haunting past had caused the emperor much trauma. Bong Wan, worried, observed the emperor's expression. Suddenly, the memories of this body came rushing back. It was Hua Jin who had pushed the emperor into the well. At that moment, Hua Jin appeared. The emperor cast a furious glare at her. Bong Wan instructed her father to take the emperor inside to rest, as she needed to speak with Hua Jin. After the emperor left, Bong Wan coldly warned Hua Jin. She had discovered the truth about Hua Jin's past. Bong Wan told Hua Jin to confess everything to the emperor. However, Hua Jin refused to listen. In a fit of rage, she stormed off and ran into the emperor. Hua Jin pretended to be concerned about the emperor's health, but the emperor's attitude had changed. He said he needed to find something. Hua Jin secretly glanced at the well behind him, wondering what the emperor was searching for. At that moment, the old man rushed over and guided the emperor inside, while Hua Jin immediately returned to the palace. Bong Wan's memories became clearer, and the emperor's past was filled with tragedy. His family had been killed one by one, with only the emperor lucky enough to escape. Suddenly, the emperor turned to Bong Wan and said he didn't want her to become his enemy. These words moved Bong Wan deeply. At that moment, Byung-in entered, and Bong Wan felt disheartened by the arrival of yet another person. The emperor asked what they were doing there, and Byung-in stubbornly insisted that he had come to protect the princess. However, the emperor could easily understand that Byung-in was really there to monitor him. At that moment, an unfamiliar man charged toward them. He easily bypassed the guards and rushed straight toward the emperor. Bong Wan was terrified by the audacity of the attacker, but fortunately, the emperor stepped forward to protect her. He kicked the intruder and knocked him unconscious. It was then that Byung-in rushed forward to check the man's identity. It turned out that the intruder was Byung-in's younger brother. The younger brother suddenly woke up, and it was revealed that he had been infatuated with Bong Wan's servant, which had driven him to take such reckless actions. The emperor used this incident to warn Byung-in, but he did not back down. Instead, he implied that the emperor was the one behind the robbery that involved the old man's possessions. Bong Wan watched watched in amusement as the two men waged a silent battle over the liquor, neither willing to back down. In the end, both were completely drunk. Bong-wan knew that the crucial moment had arrived. The emperor began probing to see if Byong-in had feelings for the princess. Byong-in did not deny it, and the two began exchanging nonsensical words that made Bong-wan uncomfortable. The battle only ended when both men passed out. After a long sleep, the emperor finally woke up. Seizing the opportunity when no one was paying attention, he disguised himself and sneaked into the mansion. He carefully made his way to where the painting was hidden, but just as he arrived, another masked figure appeared. The two came face to face, seemingly sharing the same goal. The masked figure immediately charged at the emperor, but the emperor skillfully dodged. While the battle raged outside, inside the room, Bong-wan thought of it as a kind of dance between the two. The emperor could not stall for long. He quickly counterattacked, trying to remove the assassin's mask. Just then, Bong-wan appeared, swinging a vase at the intruder. However, the assassin pushed the emperor aside as a shield and fled. Outside, Byong-in heard the noise and rushed in, but what he saw was not a confrontation. Rather, it was a romantic scene between the emperor and Bong-wan. The emperor gently placed a passionate kiss on her lips. Byong-in was furious upon seeing the person he loved in the arms of another. At that moment, the queen's father appeared and quickly pulled Byong-in outside, leaving the two alone in private. In their drunken state, they lost control of themselves. Outside, Byong-in bitterly stood guard for his rival. The noises inside grew louder, and the surrounding furniture was being knocked over. At that moment, Bong-wan regained consciousness. The king was confused by Bong-wan's strange behavior, but assumed it was due to embarrassment. As soon as Bong-wan let his guard down, the king swiftly knocked him unconscious. Afterward, the king began investigating the room. His target was the secret chamber hidden behind the folding screen. Just as the king left, Byong-in cautiously entered to check the area. When he reached Bong-wan's room, he suddenly heard a strange noise, the sound of the king trying to unlock a door. Byong-in immediately drew his sword, ready to charge in. However, he was halted by Bong-wan's playful laughter echoing through the room. Heartbroken, Byong-in quietly left. Meanwhile, the king, after thoroughly searching the secret safe, found no evidence. It seemed the old man had hidden it elsewhere. The king recalled the well in the backyard. Tossing a small flame down the well, his suspicion was confirmed. At the bottom lay the hidden secret journal. As the king prepared to descend, a group of servants suddenly appeared. Fortunately, the king managed to hide in time. Once they let their guard down, the king swiftly slipped away. He quietly returned to Bong-wan's room, reflecting on the masked man he had encountered earlier. Most likely, the masked figure was one of the prime minister's men. A new day began. As soon as Bong-wan opened his eyes, he was startled by the sinister smile of the king. Quickly regaining his composure, Bong-wan reminded himself that the king was in the enemy's territory and acting was inevitable. Bong-wan suddenly glanced around the room, noticing the wreckage caused by the two of them the previous night. He couldn't help but wonder what he had done. Bong-wan's departure left the Grand Queen Dowager feeling disheartened. Now, she would only eat dishes personally prepared by Bong-wan. The prime minister chuckled, saying he would ensure Bong-wan returned quickly. Meanwhile, at the military training ground of the royal guard, Byong-in arrived with his men, intending to stir up trouble. He demanded to check the identities of the soldiers guarding the king, but was stopped by the king's bodyguards. The confrontation quickly escalated, with both sides drawing their swords. Despite the standoff, Byong-in remained resolute in his investigation, ordering his men to search every corner of the area. This was soon reported to the king, who began strategizing how to outwit Byong-in. However, the bodyguards were concerned that the masked man might have seen the king's face. The king, on the other hand, believed that he hadn't been recognized. He mentioned a scar under the man's chin, suggesting that the masked figure might be the one who had abducted Hua Jin's maid. The news of the maid's disappearance once again reached Hua Jin, leaving her anxious about the maid's safety. The bodyguards reassured her, saying they were tracing the item Hua Jin had given to the maid and would likely find it soon. At that moment, Byong-in arrived to meet the king. He came to invite the king and Bong-wan to return to the palace. However, the king declined, expressing his desire to stay and take care of Bong-wan for one more day. Faced with this awkward situation, the old man instructed Byong-in to leave first. Only then could the king relax and enter the room freely. It wasn't just the king who felt relieved, so did the head chef of the royal kitchen. Bong-wan's absence for a while had returned the kitchen to its former state. However, the head chef couldn't meet the Grand Queen Dowager's demands. The dishes prepared by Bong-wan were on a completely different level. Meanwhile, the king casually enjoyed breakfast with Bong-wan. By now, the king had become addicted to simple, commoner-style dishes, which was evident from his facial expressions. With just one bite, Bong-wan could deduce the preparation method of the dish. At that moment, the table beside them erupted in complaints. The dire economic situation had left the people struggling to survive. They criticized the king, calling him a puppet ruler. Furious, the king gripped his bottle of wine tightly and approached the table. Instead of starting a fight, the king smiled brightly and quickly joined their conversation. Through this interaction, he gained insight into what his people truly thought. Bong-wan was enraged that they dared to insult the king. He stood up to warn them. The king, however, tried to calm Bong-wan's fury. Just as Bong-wan was about to reveal his true identity, he unexpectedly claimed to be nothing more than a fan of the emperor. This touched the king deeply. The two of them strolled through the streets together. Suddenly, Bong-wan darted into a narrow alley. The king grew worried as Bong-wan boldly ventured into such a place. Dressed in luxurious attire, Bong-wan became an easy target for robbers. Just as the king had feared, a gang of thieves appeared and blocked their path, mocking them for walking straight into their trap. The king tried to reassure Bong-wan, but when he turned around, Bong-wan had already fled. Breathing a sigh of relief after escaping the thieves, Bong-wan couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. Just as she decided to return and help, she saw someone lying on the ground. Thinking it was the king who had been attacked, she hurried over, only to discover the truth. The king had easily defeated the gang, coldly snapping the neck of of one thief, he changed into the thief's clothes. Terrified, the remaining robbers fled the scene. Excitedly, Bong Wan picked up the stolen money bag from the ground before leaving. It seemed she wanted to buy something, but in reality, Bong Wan just wanted to play with everything she saw. Luckily, the king stopped her before she could be swindled out of all her money. As they continued their walk, the king shared many personal stories with Bong Wan. Gradually, they began to understand each other better. As the sky darkened, the king's guards finally completed a sketch of the assassin's mask. Disguised as a commoner, one of the guards visited a mask-making shop to investigate. After obtaining useful information, the guard quickly returned to report back. At the palace, the Grand Queen Dowager summoned the queen for a conversation. Between the two lay a grudge over the late king. Although it was the Grand Queen Dowager who orchestrated the assassination of the late king, she continually placed all the blame on the queen. To live peacefully in the palace, the queen had no choice but to accept her role as a servant to the Grand Queen Dowager. Meanwhile, Byung-in was being admonished by the prime minister. Lately, Byung-in had been deeply unsettled by the king. The prime minister stated that his confidence in placing Cheoljong on the throne stemmed from the fear he had instilled in him. This fear made it easy for the prime minister to control Cheoljong. The king recalled the day his entire family was hunted down. To save himself, he followed his mother's instructions and hid at the bottom of a deep well. Since then, that well had haunted the king's memories. This time, he summoned all his courage and climbed down into the darkness. In the pitch-black void, the king desperately searched for the book. Suddenly, someone closed the well's lid. Fear quickly engulfed him. The king tried to calm himself, convincing himself it was only an illusion. But then, the image of his late father appeared. Screams echoed all around him. Overwhelmed, the king clutched his head in pain and terror. At the same time, in the palace, Hwajin recalled her childhood. She was often teased by her friends for resembling So-dang too much. Since childhood, the two had been close friends, both sharing the same longing for their mothers. To reunite with her mother, So-dang had chosen the path of self-sacrifice. She climbed down into a well, where she unexpectedly encountered the king. The two decided they would end their lives together, but neither had the courage to go through with it. At that moment, Byung-in heard the sound of crying coming from the well. Not wanting to be discovered, Cheoljong urged So-dang to climb up first, while he stayed hidden below. However, that decision turned out to be a grave mistake. The prime minister had ordered his men to seal the well. This entire scene was witnessed by Hwajin. As water began to flood the well, the king struggled to climb out but couldn't. Determined to save Cheoljong, So-dang asked Byung-in to help her open the well's cover. Once the lid was opened, a loud noise startled the children, causing them to scatter in fear. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the king climbed out of the well. When he reached the top, Hwajin was already waiting for him. Because of the striking resemblance between Hwajin and So-dang, the king mistook one for the other. He handed So-dang's book to Hwajin. From that moment, their intertwined fate began. To this day, Hwajin still keeps the book the king entrusted to her. Meanwhile, the king lay unconscious at the bottom of the well. Suddenly, a shadow appeared above. Looking closely, he realized the figure was none other than Bong Wan. Bong Wan called out loudly, asking what the king was doing down there. Before he could respond, the king fainted. Bong Wan quickly carried the king back to his chamber to rest. Bong Wan couldn't understand why the king had climbed down into the well. What exactly was down there? In his delirium, the king mistakenly called Bong Wan by the name Hwajin. Just as Bong Wan was about to leave, the king grabbed his hand. The king began to confide in him about the anguish in his heart, and Bong Wan obediently stayed still, letting the king embrace him. At the same time, by the palace lake, Hwajin was dressed elegantly, gazing at the water. Bong Wan's furious face appeared, staring daggers at her. Startled, Hwajin woke up in fear. She suddenly remembered the book she had found. It turned out that the previous day, Hwajin had decided to meet the king and confess the truth. However, the servants had informed her that the king and Bong Wan had gone out. Feeling dejected, Hwajin wandered in the courtyard. She eventually reached the deep well behind the house, her face etched with sorrow. Suddenly, she spotted something hidden at the bottom of the well. Out of curiosity, she retrieved the book. Hwajin hesitated, unsure how to use the book. She contemplated using it to destroy Bong Wan once and for all. Meanwhile, Bong Wan was suffering because the king refused to let go of him. At that moment, a servant arrived. When the door opened, the servant accidentally witnessed an awkward scene. The servant chuckled at the sight of the young couple soundly asleep, embracing each other. Bong Wan suddenly woke up. In a fleeting moment of weakness, he almost reached out to touch the king's cheek, but fortunately, his reason prevailed. Just then, the king woke up as well. The king anxiously asked, "Who saved me last night?" Bong Wan replied that he had used all his strength to pull him up the previous evening. Today was the day the king and Bong Wan returned to the palace. Before they departed, Bong Wan's father gently reminded him to be careful, assuring him that he would take care of everything. The king interjected, saying he would look after Bong Wan, so there was no need to worry. Although his father seemed to be a caring parent, Bong Wan realized the heartbreaking truth. He only saw his children as political tools. Even though Bong Wan had already begun his plan for revenge, he felt like he was missing something important. Finally, he remembered what he had forgotten. It was the conferment of concubines for the king. Upon his return, Bong Wan immediately ordered all the women to gather for selection. However, he needed to meet the Grand Queen Dowager first. As soon as she saw Bong Wan return, the Grand Queen Dowager was overjoyed. Her first request was for Bong Wan to cook a meal for her. The people in the royal kitchen all showed great respect to Bong Wan. However, Bong Wan did not want to teach them. The chefs formed a human barricade, blocking his way. Only Bong Wan could save the royal kitchen. Annoyed, Bong Wan sat down and started giving instructions. Even the head chef obediently followed his orders. All the main ingredients had already been prepared. With his genius culinary knowledge, Bong Wan transformed them into a dish that touched everyone's soul. Everyone eagerly awaited the final result. However, when the Grand Queen Dowager saw rice in the soup, she became furious. Yet, she couldn't resist the dish Bong Wan had prepared. After finishing her meal, Bong Bong-wan cheerfully went to pay his respects. But when he saw a lot of food still left on the plate, he felt doomed. However, when the Grand Queen Dowager turned around, Bong-wan noticed a grain of rice stuck to her lips. It turned out she had thoroughly enjoyed the meal. The Grand Queen Dowager wants Bong-wan to pass the recipe to the head chef. If Bong-wan is dissatisfied, she will punish the head chef. Bong-wan is well aware that the Grand Queen Dowager intends to dethrone his, leaving Bong-wan in a difficult situation. As soon as they returned to the palace, the king quickly began discussing a new plan. Now that the journal had been stolen, they needed to investigate who had taken it. This journal was crucial to the success or failure of their plan. While the king was lost in thought, staring at the lake, Bong-wan appeared. Seeing Bong-wan's impeccable manners startled the king. At that moment, Hwa-jin arrived, feeling disheartened when she saw the king holding Bong-wan's hand. She had intended to give the journal to the king, but now found herself too upset to think about it. After returning to the palace, Hwa-jin wrote a letter requesting a meeting with the king. However, the letter ended up in the hands of the Grand Queen Dowager first. Curious about what Hwa-jin wanted to deliver, the Dowager began speculating. Hwa-jin, according to the arranged time, stood waiting for the king at their meeting place. Meanwhile, the king was planning to organize a grand banquet. However, the court officials did not want him to host such an extravagant event. Many suggestions were made, but no one dared go against the king's wishes. The king's clear stance made the Grand Queen Dowager uncomfortable. After the court session ended, the king went to the study to find books on hosting banquets. To his surprise, the scar-faced man was still there, nervously watching the king from above. Suddenly, the queen appeared, saying she had something urgent to discuss with him. The king, worried, wondered what it could be. The queen began by recounting the history of the late king, but her true intention was to prevent the king from meeting Hwa-jin. After the queen left, the king finally opened the letter from Hwa-jin. He hurried to the agreed meeting place, but Hwa-jin was no longer there. The king explained that the queen had come to see him, which caused him to read the letter late. Hwa-jin pouted, feeling neglected because the king had not shown her any attention. Recently, the king had only been with Bong-wan, which made Hwa-jin increasingly frustrated. She felt that the king's feelings for her had changed. Faced with Hwa-jin's question, the king hesitated, unsure whether to admit his feelings. Meanwhile, in the imperial kitchen, Bong-wan was helping the head chef create a new recipe. While working, Bong-wan asked about the chef's family. He explained that now he was all alone. The story of his sad past made the atmosphere feel heavy and quiet. To break the somber mood, Bong-wan playfully teased the head chef. After finishing a gift to present to the Grand Queen Dowager, Bong-wan happily took a break. At that moment, Byung-in appeared. His heart still ached as he saw Bong-wan with the king. This time, Byung-in came to investigate the incident where Bong-wan had fainted. He expressed his suspicion that the king might be involved in the matter and speculated that the king was likely the assassin who tried to harm Bong-wan. Bong-wan was surprised that Byung-in knew about this, but what shocked him even more was Byung-in's reaction. Why had Bong-wan fallen for that dangerous man? Feeling uncomfortable facing Byung-in's question, Bong-wan quickly ran away. Bong-wan needed to urgently select candidates for the royal consort. However, when he arrived at the location, no one was there. That night, Byung-in went to meet the Grand Queen Dowager to discuss the king. At the same time, the old man discovered that the journal was missing. Panicked, he rushed to find the prime minister to ask about it. Seeing the old man's anxious attitude, the prime minister asked what had happened. However, the old man didn't dare admit he had lost the journal. He made up an excuse and hurried home. But the prime minister was no fool. He quickly deduced that the old man had lost the journal. Meanwhile, in a remote corner of the palace, a maid, under the orders of the queen, threw an item into a deep well. The object that Hwa-jin had given to the servant had been found, but it had been sold by someone else. This meant that Hwa-jin's trusted maid had been killed. The item in the deep well was accidentally spotted by another maid. Her loud scream alarmed the entire palace. Hwa-jin, terrified, rushed to the well. The face of the maid had been horribly deformed from being submerged in water for too long. Hwa-jin recalled the words the queen had said to her. She understood that this was a warning from the queen. Furious, Hwa-jin vented her anger on a target practice board. She swore that she would avenge this betrayal. Meanwhile, in the palace, the Grand Queen Dowager went to reprimand the king. She felt threatened as the king's claws became more and more evident. Facing her enemy, the king had to grit his teeth and endure. The Grand Queen Dowager wanted the king to behave obediently and never go against her wishes. That night, the king had another nightmare. In his dream, he found himself tightly bound to a chair. The journal he had been searching for was now in the hands of the prime minister. The door opened, and the scene of a burning house made the king panic. He realized that the officials and the Grand Queen Dowager had been manipulating him. Frightened, the king suddenly woke up. To calm his mind, he wrote down the words that Bong-wan often said to him. As for Bong-wan, in his peaceful dream, he imagined being able to take a bath with the royal consorts. But before he could enjoy it for long, the king's face suddenly appeared, making Bong-wan terrified. Storms are about to arrive. Ga-jin has handed over the imperial ledger to the Grand Queen Dowager, and her goal is to bring down Bong-wan once and for all. Eventually, Bong-wan woke up, feeling irritated, and ordered someone to summon the king. Meanwhile, the king was very happy because he missed Bong-wan. To clear his mind, Bong-wan asked the royal physician to come for treatment. After the consultation, Bong-wan felt much better. The royal physician explained that once Bong-wan accepted it, the pain would no longer be an issue. While the physician was there, Bong-wan also asked him to prepare some beauty products, certain that the Grand Queen Dowager would like them. Shortly after the physician leaves, Bong-wan's father arrives to speak with them. He subtly tries to inquire if anything unusual happened while Bong-wan was at home. Hesitant, Bong-wan responds by asking if there is a problem. Bong-wan's father tactfully says they were regretful that the two left so soon. Realizing he couldn't extract any information, he decides to retreat for now. Now, Bong-wan had an important task to do. He needed to select consorts for the king in order to carry out his plan more easily. Bong-wan went went to win the favor of the Grand Queen Dowager, who felt very comfortable whenever Bong-wan took care of her. At the same time, in the palace, Hwa-jin unexpectedly came to see the king. She had drawn a portrait of her servant and wanted to ask the guards to confirm it again. Now, only the two of them were left in the palace. The king gently took Hwa-jin's hand, gently remarking that she must have been very sad the night before. Hwa-jin replied that she had calmed down after last night, but upon seeing Hwa-jin's expression, the king knew she had endured much pain. After Hwa-jin left, the king summoned the head chef. The head chef stood nervously in front of the king, accidentally spilling all the documents he was carrying. However, the king didn't reprimand him. Instead, he sat down and chatted with the head chef. They talked like old friends. The king was doing his best to prepare an extravagant banquet, but this time it seemed to be more special than usual. The king decided to invite all the citizens to the banquet. Upon hearing this, the head chef was deeply moved. He promised to do his best to prepare the banquet this time. This banquet was more than just a social gathering, it was a fierce battle. The prime minister had learned that the important ledger had gone missing, and his strongest suspicion fell on the king. As a result, he sought to prevent the king from using the ledger to incriminate him. On the other hand, the king decided to take full advantage of the misunderstanding the prime minister had. The king knew he had to make the most of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A new day began, and right from the early morning, Bong-wan summoned many beautiful women, all candidates for the next position as consort. Bong-wan happily selected the most deserving ones and spent time chatting and getting to know them better. After a thorough selection process, Bong-wan chose the three most exceptional candidates. The official title bestowing ceremony then took place, signaling the king's move to establish his factions. The newly appointed consorts all came from powerful families. After the ceremony, the queen and Hwa-jin met with Bong-wan. The queen scolded Bong-wan for not visiting her, but Bong-wan skillfully responded to her words. The queen asked why Bong-wan didn't train to participate in the hunting competition, but Bong-wan was uninterested in such matters. Instead, Bong-wan continued to play and socialize with the new consorts. That night, Bong-wan found herself restless and couldn't sleep, so she wrote letters to the consorts. However, the three letters were mistakenly delivered to the king. The king was puzzled as to why Bong-wan asked him if he had slept 3 times in a row. Eventually, Bong-wan received a reply. She was surprised by the letter, which was truly moving. In response to the consorts, Bong-wan poured all her heart into writing flirtatious, sweet words. The king still didn't understand Bong-wan's intentions. The two exchanged letters throughout the night. A new day began, and Bong-wan was wandering the palace when she encountered the king. However, her attitude was completely different from the night before. Just as Bong-wan was about to leave, the king unexpectedly had a nosebleed. Seeing the king overworking himself made Bong-wan's heart ache. That night, after writing to Bong-wan, the king had a peaceful and restful sleep. In contrast to the king's comfort, Byung-in spent day and night practicing for the upcoming banquet. The countdown for the banquet has begun. Today is the day of the sports event, and everyone is happily decorating the palace to make it more magnificent. The security patrols have also become stricter. The scar-faced man, disguised as a soldier, attacked the food supply convoy. He ruthlessly checked the supplies to satisfy his own desires. To make everything perfect, the princess had consulted a fortune teller, and her luck today was extremely low, in contrast to the emperor and Bong-wan, which made the princess angry. Could it be that Bong-wan has some secret card that hasn't been used yet? Therefore, the princess summoned Bong-wan to talk. She scolded him for not fulfilling his duties, and wanted him to serve her like the grand empress. Bong-wan, feeling dejected, went to the royal kitchen. To ease the tension, Bong-wan decided to make some popcorn. A pot of popcorn was prepared, but a major issue arose. The banquet was about to begin, but the food supply convoy had been robbed. The kitchen was now in chaos. Suddenly, the head chef remembered his dry goods storage and hurriedly went with the eunuch to check. On the way, they unexpectedly encountered the emperor, so the emperor followed them to supervise. When the door opened, a foul odor hit their noses, and all the ingredients in the storage had spoiled. The emperor angrily demanded to know who had protected them. The eunuch, frightened, knelt on the ground. Time was running out, and the emperor ordered the head chef to quickly find a solution. At the same time, in the royal kitchen, a stranger had secretly slipped poison into the spice container. The loud noise caught Bong-wan's attention. The stranger pretended to know nothing and then bowed to Bong-wan. Bong-wan was surprised that there was someone like a presidential secretary in this era. Enraged, Bong-wan chased the stranger away, but in the process, accidentally stepped on her dress, causing the popcorn to spill everywhere. The stranger quickly fled the scene. To buy time while waiting for the ingredients, the emperor ordered the guards to extend the performance schedule. Only then did he begin the ceremony. All the important figures had arrived, and Bong-wan could feel the hostility directed towards her. The official ceremony began, and after the cultural performance, the martial arts display followed. The emperor's trusted bodyguards performed, all of them skilled martial artists, which excited the crowd. Next came the special forces, equipped with guns, and everyone was shocked by the power they displayed. On Bong-wan's side, however, the excitement was not shared. The Grand Empress felt bored by the performance, and now the event she had been waiting for had finally arrived, the annual hunting competition. Both Hwa-jin and Bong-wan were set to participate in this event. Bong-wan eagerly dressed up, ready for the contest, but unlike Bong-wan, Hwa-jin did not feel the same joy. Hwa-jin cast a cold, icy glare at Bong-wan. As the signal horn sounded, the competition officially began. Everyone used fake names to join the contest, except for Hwa-jin. Her true target was not the hunt itself, but Bong-wan. Unaware of being the target, Bong-wan calmly wandered through the forest. By chance, Bong-wan encountered a eunuch who was hiding. Not wanting to get hurt, the eunuch devised a plan with Bong-wan. Bong-wan, pleased to score her first point, continued her stroll in the forest. Suddenly, she came across Hwa-jin. Enraged, Hwa-jin aimed an arrow at Bong-wan, and the arrow quickly shot towards her. After the contestants left, feeling extremely bored, the Grand Empress went to the Emperor and suggested that he fight against Byung-in. Despite the Emperor's refusal, the Grand Empress insisted that he participate. This was part of Byung-in's plan to reveal the Emperor's true nature to everyone. To ensure safety, they decided to use paper fans instead of swords. Byung-in showed no mercy, repeatedly attacking the Emperor. Enraged by his lack of manners, the Emperor declared that today he would teach him who the true master of this place was. With those words, the Emperor leaped into action, attacking Byung-in. The Emperor's strength was not to be underestimated, as he easily knocked Byung-in off the stage. Everyone was stunned to witness the Emperor's impressive martial arts abilities. Even the Grand Empress and the Prime Minister were shocked. The battle became increasingly intense, with neither side giving way. Eventually, Byung-in realized that the person he had confronted earlier was none other than the Emperor himself. His anger reached its peak, and he decided to challenge the Emperor directly. The two charged at each other without fear. The Emperor still held the upper hand, his strikes combining both power and technique. In an instant, Byung-in was defeated. Now, do you know who the true master of the palace is? The Emperor asked. Enraged by the humiliation, Byung-in glared at the Emperor as he walked away. The Prime Minister, disappointed, approached Byung-in. I have something for you to do. Meanwhile, Bong-wan had narrowly avoided the arrow. Hwa-jin explained that she had been focused on the competition, but Bong-wan could sense the murderous intent coming from her. Angered, Bong-wan turned to leave, but before she could, Hwa-jin angrily asked why Bong-wan had shot her servant. Bong-wan was confused, not understanding what Hwa-jin meant. The incident of the servant being discovered in the well wasn't her doing, but Hwa-jin refused to believe anything Bong-wan said. No matter how much Bong-wan tried to explain, Hwa-jin remained firm in her belief. A direct confrontation between the two followed. Just as Bong-wan turned to leave, Hwa-jin shot an arrow that struck her in the head, causing Bong-wan to collapse. Bong-wan wanted to retaliate, but her archery skills were terrible. She had no choice but to swallow her anger. The competition ended, and it was time to announce the results. Everyone expected Hwa-jin to win, especially with her high score. However, in the end, the victory went to Bong-wan, because the eunuch she shot, representing the tiger, was worth 10 points. Everyone was stunned by the unexpected result. Although Bong-wan had won, the storms were far from over. She realized that someone was trying to sow discord between her and Hwa-jin. The palace maidservant who was attending her advised Bong-wan to be cautious, as there were many ruthless methods of poisoning in the palace. Suddenly, Bong-wan spotted the stranger from the royal kitchen earlier that morning. She quickly hid behind a bush and watched him closely. His sneaky behavior raised her suspicions. Bong-wan ordered the senior palace official to investigate the identity of these individuals, knowing that someone was attempting to sabotage her. Meanwhile, the guards had returned after purchasing enough food supplies, but on the way back, they were ambushed by a group of bandits. These were no ordinary thieves. They were highly trained mercenaries. Once they achieved their objective, they quickly withdrew, leaving the supplies in disarray, with rice spilling out. The poor people nearby rushed to gather the fallen rice to take home. The scene quickly descended into chaos. The guards, pained by the situation, were reluctant to attack the citizens. With little time left before the banquet, Bong-hwan had to personally prepare the dishes. She could no longer trust anyone else. While checking the water barrel, Bong-hwan unexpectedly encountered the Emperor, who was very concerned about the upcoming banquet. He ordered the head chef to do his best. Bong-hwan felt that the Emperor should abandon the battle, but the Emperor was determined not to back down. Now was the time for him to give his all. The palace maidservant wondered why Bong-hwan wasn't being more honest, as it was clear that she was very worried about the Emperor. After changing into her attire, the Emperor finally returned to his seat as the presiding leader. The Grand Empress made subtle remarks about the Emperor hiding his true strength, and even the Prime Minister began to feel wary. Meanwhile, outside the palace, the senior palace official was trying to follow the stranger, determined to uncover his true identity. The stranger, unaware of being followed, revealed everything. The poison that the stranger had put into the water barrel had caused the chefs to suffer from stomach aches, rendering them unable to cook. The head chef was shocked to find the imperial physician there. The physician explained that it was Bong-hwan who had summoned him for a checkup, as someone had poisoned the water supply. The situation was growing increasingly difficult. Ingredients were scarce, the chefs were poisoned, and the time was running out. In such an emergency, an anonymous chef appeared, and it was none other than Bong-hwan herself, who decided to step into the kitchen. The head chef, after visiting the king's garden, gathered a lot of fresh ingredients. Seeing the pile of fresh vegetables in front of them, the head chef presented a list of dishes chosen by the Emperor. However, the ingredients were insufficient to prepare these dishes. Suddenly, Bong-hwan looked at the imperial physician and came up with a bold idea. Meanwhile, in the hall, the officials had been waiting from morning until noon, growing increasingly impatient. The Grand Empress continuously urged the Emperor to serve the banquet, as everyone could hardly wait any longer. The Emperor couldn't hide his worry. Just then, the palace maid brought in the first dish. The Grand Empress was not pleased to see only one dish. After all, this was supposed to be a grand banquet. The civil and military officials began to criticize the appearance of the food. The Emperor explained that over the past year, the country had experienced natural disasters, and the people had suffered from poor harvests, lacking food. To remind everyone of the hardships the people had endured, the Emperor wanted everyone to experience humble, everyday dishes. However, the officials remained dissatisfied with the Emperor's explanation. To silence them, the Emperor lifted the lid from the dish. Inside the dish was a spiral-cut potato, shaped like waves, which was one of the most popular snacks in the modern era. The imperial physician felt heartbroken when he saw his precious silver needles being tossed into the frying oil. The final result astonished the head chef. The presentation of the dish was flawless. It was the first time the head chef had seen such a dish. To speed up the process, Bong-hwan instructed everyone to help peel the potatoes while she prepared the secret seasoning. seasoning. Everyone worked together to complete the task Bong-wan had given them. To help the emperor understand her intentions, Bong-wan named the dish Dragon's Beard Potato, a dish symbolizing good luck. However, the civil and military officials looked down on it. That was until the Grand Empress began tasting it. The irresistible flavor of the dish made everyone marvel in admiration. They could hardly believe that from a simple potato, Bong-wan had created such an exceptional dish. But it didn't end there. The emperor then introduced 3 accompanying sauces. When paired with the twisted potato, the flavor exploded, and even the notoriously picky prime minister couldn't resist. Bong-wan was still preparing the second dish, instructing the head chef to knead the dough thoroughly because the second dish was a hamburger, a very popular fast food. The combination of tomato sauce and pork had created a whole new realm of culinary art, a dish that was both delicious and meaningful. The prime minister felt that his plan was about to fail, so he ordered Byung-in to implement a different plan. After the main course, Bong-wan had prepared a dessert made from agar-agar. The secrets didn't stop there. Bong-wan also hid hidden rewards in the ice cream sticks. After a long, exhausting day, the banquet was finally a great success. Just then, the royal consort returned with the results of the investigation. Bong-wan realized that he was the ancestor of the president's secretary. Since Bong-wan had been absent for so long, he had to return to the palace as soon as possible. As Bong-wan walked by, Hwa-jin noticed the faint smell of cooking oil on him and asked the princess when the book would be announced. At that moment, the emperor stepped forward and declared loudly that from now on, everyone should reduce their food portions, as the palace needed to set an example to save more common people. Anyone who dares to defy will be punished. Unexpectedly, the prime minister interrupted while the emperor was speaking. He had ordered the capture of the emperor's secret army, a direct strike aimed at Cheoljong. The emperor was furious that the prime minister dared to cause such chaos, but the prime minister remained calm. He even boldly questioned whether the emperor knew the true identity of these people. The emperor, in a fit of rage, accused the prime minister of being the one behind them. The prime minister laughed and asked the emperor if he thought the 3 great clans would side with him. The emperor's anger reached its peak, and he shouted that this was treason. How dare the prime minister issue orders to the king? The prime minister showed no fear. He ordered the soldiers to deal with all those who had been captured. The emperor was pushed into a difficult situation, and his nightmare slowly became a reality. Tears streamed down his face as he painfully followed the prime minister's orders. After his subordinates were taken away for trial, the emperor had no mood to continue the ceremony. However, he still had to finish the banquet. This incense was meant for those who had sacrificed. Just as the last stick of incense burned out, a loud explosion suddenly blew the emperor away. Bong-wan rushed to the emperor in fear, but he was stopped by the soldiers. The scene was exactly as the emperor had once dreamed. Everything was gradually getting worse, and even the empress was shocked by the situation. She cast a suspicious glance at the prime minister before quickly leaving. Bong-wan tried to rush toward the emperor, but he was stopped by his father. In order to find out who had harmed the emperor, Byung-in ordered the soldiers to check each person one by one. Anyone could be suspected of being part of the prime minister's plot, so it was the prime minister himself who had to uncover the truth. The princess couldn't believe that the prime minister would harm the emperor. Even if he was an enemy, such an open attack on the emperor was unacceptable. Hwa-jin swore in pain that she would take revenge on those responsible for this. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Bong-wan sadly reminisced about the gift the emperor had given him. Just then, Byung-in appeared. Bong-wan asked about the emperor's condition, but Byung-in did not want Bong-wan to visit the emperor. Things were getting complicated now. Just as Bong-wan was about to leave, Byung-in suddenly hugged him. It was the emperor who wanted to deceive Bong-wan. Bong-wan quickly pushed Byung-in away, stating that he needed to rest. Byung-in sadly walked away. To vent his anger, he began to interrogate those who had been captured. They were soldiers raised by the emperor, and they went mad, accusing the prime minister of being the one behind this. Byung-in ordered his subordinates to knock them out. Just then, the soldiers discovered gunpowder in the incense burner. Byung-in needed to find out its origin. The prime minister personally ordered that the person behind this must be found. After the prime minister left, Bong-hwan's old father arrived and knelt before the prime minister. He said he had kept a copy of the book in case of emergencies. The prime minister was furious that he had betrayed the family. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the emperor's condition was worsening. Although he had regained consciousness after the explosion, the emperor's mind was no longer clear. News of the emperor waking up was reported to Bong-wan, who hurried into the palace to check on the situation. Seeing the emperor's face covered with wounds, Bong-wan felt a deep pain. The explosion had caused severe damage to the emperor's hearing. Just then, Hwa-jin entered. She ordered everyone to leave, staying behind herself to care for the emperor. Hwa-jin, in anger, said that Bong-wan's own family had harmed the emperor and pleaded with Bong-wan not to stay any longer. Bong-wan sadly left, leaving only Hwa-jin. She carefully tended to the emperor, but unexpectedly, Hwa-jin saw the emperor's notebook where he had written about Bong-wan. A feeling of jealousy stirred in her heart. When Bong-wan returned, unexpectedly, the prime minister was there waiting for her. The prime minister asked if she knew what had happened. Bong-wan recalled the moment the emperor fell into the well. Under the pressure from the prime minister, Bong-wan revealed that she had found the emperor. The prime minister then asked if Bong-wan remembered what he had said earlier. Bong-wan asked what she would gain by following the prime minister's words. To survive in this place, Bong-wan decided to side with the powerful, even if it meant causing the emperor's downfall. After speaking, Bong-wan jumped into the water. Suddenly, she saw So-young, the soul of this body. All of So-young's memories flooded into Bong-wan's mind. So-young had to live as a political pawn, and it was the prime minister who had ordered So-young to spy on the emperor. However, at that time, So-young had refused. She didn't want to follow her family's orders. The prime minister had threatened that if So-young didn't comply, he would be the one to depose the emperor. After understanding everything, Bong-wan immediately surfaced from the water. The entire palace had deceived So-young. At that moment, the old man was startled when he saw Bong-wan drenched. He was angry that his daughter had done something so foolish, but the one who should be angry was Bong-wan. Bong-wan confronted him, asking why he had sold out his own daughter like that. The old man was speechless when he heard his daughter's grievances. Bong-wan spoke the hidden thoughts of So-young, revealing that, in the end, it was the old man who had pushed So-young down the path of destruction. After saying this, Bong-wan left. Byung-in was surprised when Bong-wan came to find him. Bong-wan said she had something to ask of him. From now on, don't do anything, don't worry about me. Bong-in looked at Bong-wan with pain as she left coldly. Afterward, Bong-wan went to visit the emperor. She was deeply moved when she saw the emperor's affection, and Bong-wan decided that she would side with the emperor. Meanwhile, at the residence of the empress, Byung-in had come to report the results of the investigation to her. This happened to be seen by the prime minister. The source of the gunpowder had been found. It was the prime minister's right-hand man. The empress, curious, asked what Byung-in wanted. He said what he needed was the emperor. He was sure he would overthrow the emperor. The prime minister was waiting for Byung-in in front of his house. Despite being father and son, they did not trust each other. The prime minister had long known of Byung-in's feelings for So-young, and that was the very motivation behind Byung-in's efforts. A new day began, and early in the morning, Bong-wan's father came to meet the empress. He said he had lost the master ledger, which made the empress angry. The old man explained that it was the emperor who was holding the ledger and pleaded with the empress to spare Bong-wan. Meanwhile, Bong-wan had been in the kitchen since early morning. Only cooking could ease her troubled mind. Today, Bong-wan was preparing carrot soup. The head chef quickly wrote down the recipe. It was a simple dish, but carried much meaning. The head chef thought the dish was for the emperor, but he was mistaken. Bong-wan offered it to the empress and the princess. Bong-wan wanted to stir up conflict between the two most powerful women in the palace. However, rather than trying to win anyone's favor, Bong-wan was ready to use those who would benefit her plan. After Bong-wan left, the empress and the princess got into an argument. The argument only stopped when Bong-wan presented the dessert. After hearing Bong-wan's introduction, both women happily enjoyed the noble dish. Despite the emperor still not fully recovered, the morning court session proceeded as usual, with the empress presiding. She thought about what Bong-wan had just said. Below, the officials were blaming each other, accusing the others of being the ones who harmed the emperor. Now, all the power in the court was in the hands of the prime minister, who decided to deal with the prisoners today. However, there was opposition to this plan, as it would cut off the leads. Suddenly, the palace door opened, and the emperor entered with a stern expression. All the officials bowed their heads before him. Just as Byung-in ordered preparations to execute the prisoners, the emperor's bodyguard brought a decree. Everyone was surprised to see that the emperor had recovered. The emperor no longer showed any hesitation toward anyone. Now was the time for the emperor to strike back. He decided to investigate the officials, firmly believing that one of them had plotted to assassinate him. The officials became anxious as the emperor declared that he had found gunpowder in the incense burner, which caused the explosion. After tracing the source, the emperor discovered those involved in the gunpowder trade. However, gunpowder was only supposed to be used for military purposes. After a thorough investigation, the emperor found that someone was illegally selling gunpowder. Everything started when the emperor ascended the throne. The emperor, in a fit of rage, shouted at the prime minister's right-hand man, who was in charge of the weapons depot, calling him a traitor. It turns out that from the very beginning, everything was part of the emperor's plan, even the capture of the emperor's secret army. With the evidence being so clear, they could not escape punishment. The emperor ordered the arrest of these two traitors, which enraged the empress dowager. She scolded the emperor, warning him not to forget his limits. The emperor, furious, stood up to face the empress dowager. It seemed that the empress dowager was growing old. Now, it was time for the emperor to make the decisions. The prime minister pleaded with the emperor for a chance to investigate the truth. To assert his authority, the emperor agreed, but warned that if there was no satisfactory answer, the prime minister would be deposed by the emperor himself. The court session ended in chaos. The empress dowager, infuriated, called the prime minister to speak with her. Clearly, the prime minister had made a serious mistake. He had misjudged the emperor. The prime minister warned that there was a traitor within his own faction. The news of the emperor's safety reached Bong-hwan, and everyone rejoiced at the news. Tears fell from Bong-hwan's eyes. Hwa-jin hurried to the emperor, embracing him, though her emotions were somewhat confused. In contrast to Hwa-jin, Bong-hwan chose to celebrate by drinking wine in the royal kitchen. Despite the maid's attempts to stop her, Bong-hwan had no intention of stopping. Little did she know, the empress dowager had sent people to search her room. They discovered the hidden ledger in Bong-hwan's room. The prime minister angrily declared that he would handle Bong-hwan. After getting drunk, Bong-hwan returned to her room, unaware of the danger looming. When she opened her eyes, she was surprised to find the emperor lying beside her, asleep. Bong-hwan thought it was just a dream, but when the emperor spoke, Bong-hwan quickly sat up in panic. It turned out that the night before, the emperor had been curious about who prepared the dishes at the banquet, so he went to the royal kitchen to ask the head chef. However, the head chef claimed to be the one who cooked them. This lie could not fool the emperor. The head chef said that Bong-hwan had ordered him to keep the matter secret. The emperor wondered why Bong-hwan would help him, so he went to Bong-hwan's residence to talk. Meanwhile, a blind servant by the side of the empress was writing a secret code. After the blind servant left, the emperor's guards came to confirm that the writing on the wall indicated that Bong-hwan was in danger. It turned out that the servant was an agent of the emperor. At this point, Bong-hwan still didn't know what was going on. Because of the deep sleep, Bong-hwan couldn't tell what was real and what was a dream. Therefore, Bong-hwan poured out everything to the emperor, revealing his heart. It wasn't until the morning that Bong-hwan realized what had happened the night before. Terrified, Bong-hwan screamed, "Why are you here? The emperor, shocked, thought someone was attacking. Bongwan forced the emperor to recount what happened the previous night. However, just as the emperor had only shared a little, Bongwan went mad and fled. The scream of injustice echoed throughout the capital. Recently, everything in the palace has become more chaotic than ever. Therefore, the empress took the risk of inviting a monk to come. The monk told her that someone in the palace would die today. The empress, worried, didn't know who it would be. The monk suggested that a woman would lose her life. After the monk left, Huajin unexpectedly came to find the empress. Huajin said that the night before, the emperor had slept with Bongwan, which made Huajin feel jealous. Bongwan was also in a similar situation. Bongwan couldn't accept that she had slept with the emperor. The head chef, terrified, knelt down and confessed everything to the emperor, which drove Bongwan into madness. Bongwan didn't know if it was because she had been in this body for too long and her soul had become tainted. Just then, the emperor arrived. As soon as Bongwan heard the emperor's voice, she quickly ran away. The emperor seemed irritated, clearly recalling that the night before, Bongwan had pounced on him like a starving tiger. The emperor ordered his men to find Bongwan immediately. When hearing the commotion, Bongwan immediately fled. By chance, Bongwan overheard a conversation between two high-ranking officials. They were surprised to see the emperor approach. The emperor, irritated, chased after Bongwan to demand justice. Although the emperor knew that Bongwan was hiding behind the folding screen, he couldn't bring himself to expose her. The emperor expressed his feelings and then left. Just then, the guards rushed in with urgent news. They had something important to discuss with the emperor. The court session that day proceeded as usual. From this day forward, the empress would no longer hold any power, as all the power was now in the emperor's hands. The empress's seat was also removed. This made the empress very angry. The only thing that could improve her mood was good food. Jung-hyun went to check on the empress and suspected that it was the emperor who was behind the explosion. Meanwhile, the emperor received a letter from Bongwan. Due to a misunderstanding, the letter was mistakenly sent to the emperor. Bongwan panicked when she saw the emperor at the meeting spot, and it was only now that the emperor realized the letter had been misdirected. However, the process didn't matter. What was important was that Bongwan's thoughts had returned to the emperor. Bongwan realized that the explosion was part of the emperor's plan. She was furious that the emperor had put himself in danger. To comfort Bongwan, the emperor confessed his feelings for her. However, Bongwan still did not accept. After all, this was Soyoung's body, and Bongwan couldn't act on her own accord. The success of the emperor's plan struck a heavy blow to the chancellor's family. The chancellor vented all his anger on the weapons manager, who indignantly explained that he did it for the sake of the family. The chancellor told him that he would give him one last chance. Today was the day of the family meeting, and the chancellor revealed that Soyoung's old father had secretly kept records of the family's dealings. However, that book was now in the chancellor's hands. If the chancellor lost his position, he would no longer be able to protect the family. The family members were terrified, knowing they were in a vulnerable position. The chancellor suggested forming a secret society with the goal of overthrowing the emperor. In order to carry out his plan smoothly, the chancellor needed to eliminate one person. He ordered a servant to put poison in Bongwan's tea. Although the servant was afraid, her greed blinded her judgment. However, the servant was also someone who valued her life more than anything and went to beg the empress for help, telling her everything the chancellor had ordered. At the same time, the emperor was speaking with his soldiers. They had been through many hardships, and so the emperor offered them a way out, telling them to return to their homelands if they wished. The emperor went to each soldier, giving them the warmest hugs, assuring them that their wishes would be fulfilled through him. Just as the soldiers were leaving, the blind servant of the empress appeared. She informed the emperor that the enemies were planning to poison Bongwan. The emperor immediately rushed back to the palace to stop the conspiracy. Meanwhile, Bongwan had been invited to have tea with the empress. Little did she know, the poison had been placed inside the ice cube in the cup of water. Since the poison would only take effect once the ice melted, it had passed through the poison testing process before being served. Bongwan, unaware, was about to take a sip of the water when a child, who was close to her, rushed over. It turned out the child had noticed the poisoned ice cube. At that moment, the chancellor appeared, and as soon as the child saw him, she became frightened and didn't dare to speak the truth. The chancellor ordered his men to take the child away, which confused Bongwan. The chancellor had come to witness Bongwan drinking the poisoned water. Bongwan, ready to drink, was stunned when the emperor suddenly appeared. Before she could process what was happening, the child threw the ice cube into the cup of water, causing a commotion. Everyone panicked as someone had interrupted the plan. The chancellor, furious, yelled at the child. Bongwan found it strange that the child had acted this way, and upon seeing the child in danger, she stood up to protect her. However, the empress insisted on having the child imprisoned. The emperor realized that the child had saved Bongwan. To avoid suspicion, the chancellor and the empress quickly left, and the plan failed. Bongwan, concerned, wondered if the child was alright. The emperor reassured her, telling her not to worry. Immediately, the emperor took Bongwan to a safe place. It was only then that Bongwan realized she had narrowly escaped being poisoned. Why did they want to kill her? The emperor informed her that a book had been found in her room, but Bongwan didn't know anything about it. The important matter now was to save the child. That night, Bongwan went to the prison. Just then, Byung-in appeared, wanting to escort the prisoner. However, Bongwan stepped in to stop him. Byung-in insisted on following orders. Bongwan promised the child she would get her out soon. At the same time, the emperor's guards discovered a palace maid had escaped. They immediately captured her for interrogation. The maid, terrified by the guard's imposing presence, was questioned. The guard drew his sword and asked, "Where did you get this bracelet?" The court session was unusual. The officials believed the child's actions were rebellious. The emperor, frustrated, looked at the old men beneath him. They only cared about fighting for power. Even the emperor couldn't save the child. Seeing the poor child being forced to drink the poison broke his heart. When Bongwan arrived arrived, it was already too late. She painfully gazed at the child one last time. Her anger reached its peak. Bongwan was ready to charge at the greedy officials above, but the emperor stopped her. Bongwan was disappointed that the emperor didn't keep his promise. In their eyes, the child was merely a political pawn. If the emperor couldn't save his own people, then he too was guilty. The emperor silently turned and walked away. Suddenly, Bongwan saw the emperor's insignia. She then realized that everything was part of the emperor's plan. Bongwan began to feign distress. After confirming that the child was safe, she breathed a sigh of relief. Once everyone had left, the child was rescued by the emperor's guards. Bongwan hurried to meet the emperor, and he reassured her that the child had been taken to a safe place. After this incident, Bongwan began to view the emperor more positively. To get revenge on those who had tried to harm her, she decided to cleanse everything. The two most suspicious individuals were Hua Jin and the empress, as they always harbored a deep hatred toward Bongwan. However, Bongwan couldn't understand how the book had fallen into their hands. What exactly was written in that book? Meanwhile, at the chancellor's residence, Byung-in was furious when the chancellor wanted to poison Bongwan. The chancellor claimed that Bongwan had betrayed the family. However, Byung-in could not accept this reason. From this moment on, he decided to sever ties with the family. Anyone who dared to harm Bongwan would be eliminated. Byung-in worked hard to form his own faction, knowing that only when he became stronger could he challenge both the chancellor and the emperor. A new day began, and Bongwan decided to summon her father to the palace for a conversation. Soon enough, the old man arrived, and both of them had things they wanted to say. In the end, they both apologized sincerely. However, there was something else of great importance. Bongwan wanted to know what was written in the book. The old man revealed that the book contained records of illegal transactions within their family. Finally, Bongwan understood everything. The old man explained that when the book went missing, the servant had allowed Hua Jin into the house. Bongwan became enraged as she identified her enemies. The first was the empress, followed by the queen, and lastly, Hua Jin. Bongwan dressed up beautifully to confront her enemies. The first one she approached was the empress. Bongwan presented a simple dish to the empress, one that appeared unattractive on the outside, which displeased the empress. But that wasn't all. Bongwan also offered a drink, a gift to reciprocate the empress's previous gesture. Using a mocking tone, she taunted the empress. The empress hesitated, unwilling to taste it. Bongwan continued to provoke her, saying that if the empress wouldn't drink it, then she would drink it herself. Without fear, Bongwan drank it all in one go. Faced with her enemy, Bongwan showed no fear. Instead, she exerted immense pressure on her adversary. The empress was furious that Bongwan dared to challenge her. It wasn't just Bongwan who began to cleanse things up. The emperor also took action to deal with those who had betrayed him. The second round of confrontations was with the queen. Bongwan acted arrogantly in front of her, ignoring the venomous words from the queen. She did as she pleased, and the queen was terrified when she realized that Bongwan knew she had placed the book in the room. Despite trying to assert control over Bongwan, every attempt was exposed by Bongwan. In a defiant move, Bongwan threw all the burning incense sticks onto the altar, enraging the queen. The queen wanted to attack Bongwan but hesitated, not daring to take action. Bongwan emerged victorious in this confrontation. Outside, the emperor, worried, had secretly followed Bongwan, but it seemed his worry was unfounded. The final person was Hua Jin. She was standing by the lake, enjoying the scenery, when suddenly, Bongwan threw a stone, disturbing the calm surface of the water. Hua Jin, furious, attempted to leave, but Bongwan wouldn't allow it. Bongwan asked her what she truly wanted from her, explaining that she hadn't done anything wrong to Hua Jin. If anyone were to be blamed, it was Hua Jin for always playing the victim. Hua Jin was frightened by Bongwan's words. Just as she was about to fall into the lake, Bongwan grabbed her hand. She warned that this tired old trick should never be used again. The court meeting that day was particularly special. The chancellor requested to resign, which meant that absolute power was now in the hands of the emperor. The emperor decided to establish a new department, with the most urgent task being the revision of the laws. Any official who broke the law would be charged with treason. All the ministers were intimidated by the emperor's authority. However, they still wanted to nominate someone, and that person was none other than Byung-in, the chancellor's son, who took the vacant position. The final battle was about to begin. The frightening thing about Byung-in was that he had the full support of his family. Although the emperor had taken real power, other powerful families still held influence, and the emperor needed to recruit the necessary personnel to build his new government. At this critical moment, Bongwan sent a letter, and the emperor hurried to meet her. Though she had successfully exacted her revenge, the battle was far from over. The emperor smiled as he approached Bongwan. She looked even more beautiful than usual today. Bongwan had come to form an alliance, as she had now betrayed her family. They were on the same side now, and the emperor gladly agreed to her proposal. Unexpectedly, Bongwan stepped forward, and they both drank from the same cup of tea to solidify their alliance. Curious, Bongwan asked why the emperor had once wanted to dispose of her. The emperor explained that he had initially feared she might have overheard his plans. Bongwan, feeling uncomfortable with the coldness the emperor once showed her, understood the feeling of being trampled on, and said she could sympathize with him. Hearing this, the emperor was reminded of his own painful past. Bongwan, after her conversation with the emperor, went to the royal kitchen. Suddenly, a new idea struck her. She realized that she needed to strike back one more time. She ordered that a man who resembled the president's secretary be summoned to court. He nervously faced Bongwan, who told him she could grant him a position, but in return, he had to give up something. Unbeknownst to him, the position she was offering was that of a eunuch. Byung-in was surprised to see Bongwan so ruthless in punishing others. When he arrived, he didn't know whether he was an enemy or an ally. Bongwan appeared weary while facing him and asked if he intended to betray her. Byung-in assured her that he would protect her until his last breath. After his conversation with Bongwan, Byung-in went to meet the grand princess. He was scheming to consolidate power to challenge the emperor. That night, Gajin was delighted when the emperor emperor visited. However, this time, the emperor came to reveal a secret. The grand princess was the one who had forged the documents found in the well. Gojin was shocked and unable to deny it. Moreover, the well was a place filled with the emperor's painful memories. What Gojin didn't know was that outside, the emperor's guards had witnessed her collaboration with the princess. In the end, Gojin was just a pawn. To forget her sorrow, Gojin practiced archery, recalling the times she had been used to eliminate Bong Hwan. Every night, the emperor would discuss strategies with his trusted guards. After their discussions, he would secretly return to the palace. Just then, Bong Hwan entered the room while the emperor was changing his clothes. Her heart raced, so to calm herself, she decided to cook some instant noodles. Afterward, she brought the noodles to the emperor. Seeing Bong Hwan take care of him like that, the emperor was surprised. Suddenly, the emperor asked if Bong Hwan was the one who saved him. Bong Hwan admitted that it was indeed him and explained how he had struggled to pull the emperor out of the well. However, the emperor replied that he was asking about something that happened 8 years ago. Bong Hwan was astonished that someone had fallen into the well twice. Regardless of the emperor's story, Bong Hwan calmly ate noodles. When he saw the emperor engrossed in reading, Bong Hwan asked if he still had nightmares. The emperor said he only had them occasionally, but the dreams had become increasingly vivid, which frightened him. Despite this, the emperor could not sit still. He needed to prepare thoroughly for the final battle. Bong Hwan began to feel worried, but ultimately, he still believed the emperor would win. The emperor laughed at Bong Hwan's words of reassurance, but Bong Hwan was serious. He asked if the emperor still remembered what he had said, that he was a time traveler who had entered this body. The emperor laughed, saying he thought it was just a joke. "Do you expect me to believe that?" he said. To prove his point, Bong Hwan began to talk about the future, about a country called the Republic of Korea, where the people could choose their own king. The emperor, though skeptical, was intrigued by the topic. Meanwhile, the chancellor had ordered the scarred man to keep a close watch on Bong Hwan. A new day began, and as soon as Bong Hwan opened his eyes, he saw the handsome face of the emperor. At that moment, a servant ran in with news that Soyoung's father had collapsed. Bong Hwan hurried home to assess the situation. The old man, not wanting Bong Hwan to be in danger, told him to stay home. Even now, he blamed himself for ruining the family's affairs. To save his daughter, the old man wanted Bong Hwan to leave the palace. Bong Hwan advised his father to focus on his health first. However, Bong Hwan needed his father's help with one thing: to clear out all the items in the warehouse at a low price for the poor. This was necessary to build a good reputation. Even the emperor was surprised by this decision. Bong Hwan also brought more good news. Soyoung's father still remembered the contents of the ledger, which recorded all the illegal activities of the officials. With this, the emperor finally had proof to go against them. Bong Hwan asked the emperor how he intended to deal with his father. The emperor firmly said that he would follow the law, but if Soyoung's father cooperated, the punishment could be reduced. It was time for court, but since Bong Hwan was a woman, she wasn't allowed to participate. However, she still wanted to see how the emperor handled his affairs. So, Bong Hwan disguised herself as a eunuch and sneaked in to watch. Indeed, the emperor was a person of great virtue and high regard. Despite the opposition from the officials, the emperor still did things his way. But the storm was far from over. Byung-in had taken it upon himself to mobilize the army to quell the northern rebellion, intending to divert the emperor's attention away from the corruption case. This irritated the emperor. The root of all the problems lay with the corrupt officials abusing their power, and yet they were conspiring together. The emperor angrily said that he would investigate whether any innocent citizens were unjustly imprisoned, and if so, he would punish them severely. After the court session, Byung-in went to meet the queen consort. Through his gaze, the queen consort realized that he had feelings for Bong Hwan. As soon as she left the palace, a former brother-in-arms of Byung-in approached. He was furious that his entire family had been punished and decided to vent his anger on Byung-in. However, he was no match for him, and Byung-in easily defeated him. Afterward, Byung-in suggested that they go into the palace together. Not stopping there, Byung-in also wanted to collaborate with the queen consort, as they both had a common enemy. Meanwhile, Bong Hwan was sitting by the lake, waiting for the ministers. She invited them to have some morning tea, but when they brought the cups to their lips, the liquid inside turned out to be wine. The ministers were startled by Bong Hwan's trick. Now, the emperor had issued a decree banning the consumption of alcohol, with severe punishment for those who disobeyed. The ministers became irritated at being played with. Bong Hwan warned that anyone who dared to defy the emperor would be dealt with harshly, even causing them to disappear. The ministers were frightened by Bong Hwan's firm stance. Word of Bong Hwan intimidating the ministers reached Byung-in. However, Bong Hwan refused to back down, and they had now become enemies. Byung-in couldn't bear it. Why did Bong Hwan choose the emperor? In pain, he reached out towards Bong Hwan, but she coldly walked away. The entire conversation was overheard by the scar-faced man. Seeing the sad expression on Bong Hwan's face, the emperor tried to cheer her up by acting comically. After a while, Bong Hwan called for the chancellor. She personally wore a sword and stood waiting for him outside. The chancellor asked what Bong Hwan's plan was. Bong Hwan threw the sword at him, asking him to draw it. Inside was only a broken sword, symbolizing the chancellor's accomplishments. This insulted the chancellor deeply. Meanwhile, Hua Jin went to meet the emperor, but the emperor sensed something was off with her. He expressed his feelings, which left Hua Jin feeling disheartened. That night, Bong Hwan came to tell the emperor about the future, and the topic of the day was monarchy. What they didn't know was that the scar-faced man was watching from outside. After a while, another uninvited guest arrived, Hua Jin. Despite being stopped, she still entered. It was only when she saw the emperor sleeping beside Bong Hwan that her heart ached. A new day began, and early in the morning, Bong Hwan went to train the emperor's guards. The emperor carefully wrote down the list of Bong Hwan's gym exercises. This long-term battle needed to be well prepared. After the training session, Hua Jin went to meet the emperor. She confessed that she wasn't the one who had saved the emperor when he was a child. However, seeing the emperor's attitude, she realized he had known all along. The emperor told her that his feelings for her hadn't changed. Hua Jin still had something to confess. She admitted that she had found the ledger but had used it to harm Bong-wan. This shocked the emperor. He blamed himself for turning Hua Jin into someone like that. Hua Jin decided to take responsibility for the consequences of her actions. The purge of corrupt officials continued as the emperor ordered the arrest of those involved in embezzlement first, followed by the enactment of new laws. The queen consort grew furious as the emperor's power grew increasingly tyrannical. Byong-in said he had prepared everything to oppose the emperor. He commanded the destruction of all records and the elimination of any harmful evidence. Anyone who betrayed them would be dealt with severely. During the day, Bong-wan would always linger around the royal kitchen, but every night he would go to the secret base with the emperor. Bong-wan used his military knowledge to help them prepare, focusing on the importance of weapons and tactics for the upcoming war. To avoid detection, they had to assume different identities. After finalizing their plans, they secretly returned to the palace to keep everything hidden. The bond between Bong-wan and the emperor grew stronger. Suddenly, Bong-wan began to feel nauseous. The emperor, worried, called for the royal physician. The physician joyfully announced that Bong-wan was pregnant. Despite the emperor's ecstatic reaction, this news overwhelmed Bong-wan beyond his limits. "How could I possibly be pregnant?" Bong-wan screamed, demanding that everyone stop. He then ordered everyone out. The emperor was confused, not understanding why Bong-wan was so angry. At the same time, Hua Jin went to speak directly with the queen consort. "Why did you forge the palace maid's document?" The queen consort smiled and explained that she only wanted to help Hua Jin awaken. Now was the time for her to take Bong-wan's position. However, Hua Jin disagreed. The news of Bong-wan's pregnancy spread throughout the palace. Byong-in became enraged when the one he loved was carrying a child with someone else. In contrast to Byong-in's fury, So-young's father, the old man, was delighted. The urgent matter now was to calm Bong-wan's anger. However, the emperor didn't know how to handle the situation. To help his brother, his trusted guard invited an expert, but this turned out to be the wrong decision. The emperor should have handled the matter himself. Meanwhile, Bong-wan was emotionally distraught. The palace maid told him that he needed to report the good news or face severe punishment. Just then, the queen consort and the grand queen consort arrived. Bong-wan, feeling exhausted, couldn't entertain them. Since hearing that Bong-wan was pregnant, the queen consort had written a talisman for him. But it wasn't just her. The grand queen consort also advised Bong-wan to drink medicine every day. Bong-wan knew that they were there to threaten him. At that moment, a wave of nausea hit, and Bong-wan weakly thanked the two for their kind intentions. At the same time, in Hua Jin's residence, the emperor's guard arrived out of concern for her. However, Hua Jin no longer intended to compete with Bong-wan. She had other matters to attend to. Since becoming pregnant, Bong-wan no longer had the freedom she once enjoyed, as there were many taboos she had to follow. The emperor visited Bong-wan every day to make her feel comfortable. To help Bong-wan feel at ease, the emperor rode a horse and took Bong-wan out for a walk. Bong-wan wondered where they were, and the emperor replied that this place would make everyone feel relaxed. Suddenly, Bong-wan had an idea. As long as her son became the king, the world would be in her hands. To prepare well for the future, Bong-wan wrote a diary for the child in her womb, containing everything that would help her survive in the palace. The news that Byong-in was pregnant reached the prime minister, who smiled upon learning that this was a great opportunity. This would deliver a heavy blow to Byong-in. That night, a group of rebels attacked the county magistrate's mansion. However, they did not target anyone specifically, which made Byong-in angry. How dare anyone attack the soldiers? The increasing number of rebels made the emperor worried, as the fallen aristocrats had banded together. To protect the child in Bong-wan's womb, the emperor needed to eliminate the threats. A new day began, and early in the morning, a malicious rumor spread through the palace. They said the relationship between Bong-wan and the emperor was fake. The emperor heard of the rumor, and some officials seized the opportunity to try to depose Bong-wan. However, Bong-wan was not at all afraid. She immediately dispelled the rumors with her actions in front of everyone. At the same time, Hua Jin came to meet the queen. Hua Jin was furious when the queen spread harmful rumors, confident that she could defeat Bong-wan. Hua Jin looked down on the queen, who was only concerned about her own life. Enraged, Hua Jin revealed everything, which wounded the queen's pride. At the same time, Bong-wan was sharing her experiences of sleeping with the emperor, and the concubines became excited by this genuine story. Just then, Hua Jin appeared, holding a bow and arrow set, and asked Bong-wan if she was confident. Bong-wan said she was certain she would win this battle. Hua Jin decided to gift the bow and arrow set to Bong-wan. As for Hua Jin, she wanted to leave the palace despite the emperor's objections. However, due to Hua Jin's determination, the emperor had no choice but to give in. The decision for Hua Jin to leave made the emperor very sad, and this painful decision was finalized. Hua Jin paid her respects one last time before turning and leaving. The emperor's guards couldn't believe it, so they went to meet Hua Jin. But this was Hua Jin's personal decision, and no one could change it. That night, the emperor practiced relentlessly. Just then, the guard appeared and requested that the emperor fight him. They quickly clashed, with the guard always being the victor in the past. However, the emperor would not give in, and both fought fiercely for Hua Jin. While the two were battling for the love of another woman, the queen in the palace spread another rumor. They claimed that the child in Bong-wan's womb was not the emperor's, but Byong-in was the real father. Storms of gossip and unrest once again surrounded the palace. The grand princess herself ordered Byong-in to deal with Bong-wan, but Byong-in begged the grand princess to spare Bong-wan. In exchange, he promised to help the grand princess regain her power. After training, the emperor returned. Suddenly, the emperor felt a surge of killing intent and quickly drew his sword, pointing it toward the enemy. From the darkness, Bong-in emerged. He threatened the nobility with a coup, but this time, he wasn't there to start a war. He came to inform the emperor that the grand princess was targeting Bong-wan. What mattered to him was Bong-wan's safety. To ensure that, the emperor needed to personally lead the army to quell the rebellion. This was the only way to save Bongwan. Time was running out, so the emperor spent the entire night sitting next to Bongwan. After parting from her, the emperor went to meet the grand princess. While the emperor was away, power would be in the hands of the grand princess. Despite the dangers awaiting him, the emperor resolutely left, disregarding all attempts to stop him. By the time Bongwan found out, it was too late. The emperor had already left with his soldiers, who led him to a remote area. This was the trap Byung-in had set for him. He wanted to have a life or death battle with the emperor. Both drew their swords and charged at each other, the sound of metal clashing echoing throughout the mountains. The emperor skillfully dodged Byung-in's blade, neither side willing to give in. Just when the emperor was cornered, he leaped and struck Byung-in with a slash. However, the wound wasn't deep enough to stop him. Byung-in immediately countered with a slash, hitting the emperor's arm. The wound began to bleed, and the emperor started wielding his sword in reverse to fight Byung-in. The soldiers around them immediately pursued the emperor. The deep wound caused the emperor to quickly lose strength, and in the end, he was surrounded. Facing the abyss below, the emperor had nowhere to escape. Byung-in told him to give up. Suddenly, the emperor jumped off the high cliff, and the violent waves erased everything. Byung-in was furious that the emperor dared to jump from such a height. He ordered his men to check below, but all they found was the emperor's cloak. At the same time, in the palace, Bongwan was worried about the emperor's safety. She recalled the memories of when they were together. The longing was overwhelming, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. Bongwan felt that the palace was strangely empty today. Just then, Byung-in appeared. He feigned sorrow as he stood before Bongwan. Bongwan sensed that something was wrong. She noticed bloodstains on Byung-in's clothes, and he quickly claimed that he had been injured during training. Byung-in's purpose in coming was to sway Bongwan to his side, but she flatly rejected him. The entire conversation was witnessed by the emperor's guards. After regaining power, the grand princess reinstated people from her own family. The balance of power shifted further in her favor. She boldly sat on the empty throne, and anyone who opposed her would have to face the consequences. Bongwan had not yet heard that the emperor was missing. Every day, she spent time with the other concubines to try to forget her sorrow, but she continuously mentioned the emperor. Even Bongwan couldn't control herself, and the tears flowed incessantly, causing her great pain. Finally, the sad news reached Bongwan. A palace maid informed her that the emperor had passed away. Bongwan's heart felt as though it were being squeezed. Why had things turned out like this? Bongwan blamed herself, wondering if the emperor would still be alive if she had stopped him. Suddenly, she read the words the emperor had written. All his feelings were for Bongwan. The emperor had promised to stay by her side when their child was born, yet now they were separated by life and death. Everyone was shocked when they heard the news. The funeral was quickly arranged. However, the whereabouts of the emperor have still not been found. Byung-in assured the empress that even if the emperor were still alive, he would not be able to return to the palace. The empress, in a hurry, stated that they needed to find the next heir within 5 days to avenge the emperor. The trusted bodyguard stormed into Bongwan's room and asked if this was Bongwan's plan. Bongwan had no idea what was going on. At that moment, Byung-in entered with his men and ordered them to arrest the bodyguard and throw him in prison. The bodyguard immediately drew his sword and rushed toward Bongwan, shouting, "How dare a eunuch like you harm the emperor?" Bongwan now understood what was happening. The bodyguard was about to strike, but then he remembered the unborn child in Bongwan's womb. In pain, the bodyguard dropped his sword, resigning himself to his fate. After the bodyguard was taken away, Bongwan angrily asked Byung-in what had happened. Byung-in explained that he had investigated the emperor's case and that the bodyguard was the one who had betrayed the emperor. He also threatened that if Bongwan did not return to his family, Bongwan would be in danger as well. Bongwan recalled the wound on Byung-in's shoulder. Could it be that Byung-in was the true culprit? Byung-in's power grew stronger and stronger. He had gathered a group of high-ranking officials to follow him, along with the support of the empress. No one could stand against him. Byung-in ordered that the emperor's faction be eradicated and security be tightened, ensuring that no one could infiltrate. Even the servants entering the emperor's chambers were strictly checked. Bongwan, risking everything, disguised himself as a eunuch to go in and clean. When he reached the coffin, he sorrowfully lifted the cloth covering it, but the corpse had been severely damaged. Bongwan immediately examined the body and eventually discovered something. A little while later, in the prison, the emperor's trusted bodyguard had been captured and was waiting for trial. They were surprised to see Bongwan appear before them. After everything was prepared, Bongwan returned to the palace to rest. He revealed to the palace maid that the emperor was still alive. Bongwan needed to find more allies, as tomorrow was the coronation day, and they needed to act quickly. Bongwan intentionally applied a pale makeup to deceive the enemies. Every day, Bongwan kneeled before the emperor's coffin. The empress showed no suspicion towards Bongwan's actions. Bongwan grew disheartened as he watched them act out their tragic crying scenes. He decided to jump in and show them how it was done. The palace maids quickly pulled Bongwan away to the resting room, where Hwajin was already waiting. Bongwan said the emperor was still alive and suspected that the empress's faction was behind it all. Now, Bongwan needed Hwajin's help. That night, Byung continued to sit with the high-ranking officials, and they gleefully celebrated having eliminated the emperor. Unexpectedly, Byung-in spoke up, stating that now that their common enemy was gone, he had prepared something to solidify their alliance. The officials were terrified, thinking Byung-in was planning a rebellion. This was his way of ensuring they all stayed in the same boat, but if they failed, they would perish as well. The officials angrily left, but Byung-in had his soldiers block their way. Anyone who defied his orders would meet their end. At the same time, Bongwan was preparing for the battle. The gates of the capital were all tightly shut. The most urgent task now was to find the emperor. Under the cover of night, Bongwan sneaked out, but he was spotted by Byung-in. Byung-in tried to persuade Bongwan to give up. In anger, Bongwan aimed a bow at him. Byung-in was shocked that Bongwan dared to point a weapon at him. Bongwan smiled and said, said that if Byung-in truly loved So-young, he should realize that the person before him was not So-young. Byung-in still refused to accept the truth. As he advanced, Bong-won shot an arrow at Byung-in's leg and quickly fled the scene. Furious at being betrayed, Byung-in was left seething. After escaping from him, Bong-won was suddenly stopped by two palace maids. They wanted to help and accompany him. Seeing the pitiful faces of the two maids, Bong-won agreed to let them follow. It had been a long time since Byung-in returned home. However, the Prime Minister wasn't all that surprised. He had already suspected that Byung-in was planning a rebellion, so the Prime Minister went to meet the Empress. They had to get their hands on the letter of rebellion. The Prime Minister also confirmed that Bong-won had left the palace and was likely trying to bring the Emperor back. He had also prepared someone to take the blame, Byung-in, and asked the Prime Minister to help him keep an eye on the palace while he went out to find and eliminate both the Emperor and Bong-won. The bodyguard was informed of Byung-in's departure from the palace. At this moment, the Emperor was still alive. He was fortunate to have been saved by a man from the forest, but the man's identity was not simple. He had guessed that Cheoljong was being pursued by the soldiers. Just then, there was a sound outside. The Emperor realized that the forest man was acting suspiciously. Meanwhile, Bong-won was still searching for the Emperor. Not only Bong-won, but also Byung-in's men were scouring the entire mountain. By coincidence, they discovered Bong-won. To allow Bong-won to escape, the palace attendant risked his life to hold off Byung-in's soldiers. Enraged, Byung-in killed the palace attendant. Bong-won was quickly pursued to a cliff. Byung-in, furious, grabbed Bong-won by the neck and madly demanded, "Who are you?" Bong-won struggled desperately but couldn't escape his grip. Bong-won revealed the whole truth to him, but Byung-in could not accept it. Just as he was about to strike at Bong-won, his heart wavered. He could not bring himself to harm the woman he loved. At that moment, soldiers arrived, and Byung-in, furious, drew his sword to protect Bong-won. In the end, he chose to believe that So-young was still alive. Bong-won grabbed his hand, and they began to leave. The soldiers started rushing toward them, surrounding them. On the way, a scar-faced man appeared. He had come to take down Byung-in. Byung-in fought while trying to protect Bong-won, but Bong-won still took a hit. As Byung-in desperately protected So-young, he was stabbed. Bong-won seized the opportunity to attack the scar-faced man and fled. Byung-in knew he couldn't hold on much longer, so he handed the letter from the rebels to Bong-won. It was a weapon that could help Bong-won overthrow them. Bong-won was heartbroken that Byung-in had sacrificed himself for her. Byung-in pleaded with Bong-won to save So-young's life. Then he charged at the scar-faced man to continue the fight. The two clashed fiercely, neither giving way. Though injured, Byung-in was still able to hold his own against him. In a fit of rage, Byung-in demanded to know who had sent him. The scar-faced man replied that it was the Prime Minister's orders. Then, he lunged and knocked Byung-in's sword out of his hand. With one strike, the scar-faced man sent Byung-in to meet the King of Hell. Bong-won, in pain, watched as Byung-in slowly collapsed. Before he passed, the happy memories with So-young suddenly flooded back. Byung-in shed tears as he realized he had not recognized So-young all this time. In the end, he had chosen the path of sacrifice to protect the one he loved. Byung-in's men continued to chase after Bong-won. Bong-won quickly hid in a corner to shake them off. The scar-faced man, feeling suspicious, went over to check by a tree. Luckily, Bong-won had hidden elsewhere. Fearfully, Bong-won crawled through the dark forest, holding the evidence of the rebellion in their hands. In the midst of despair, the Emperor suddenly appeared. Bong-won broke down in tears like a child, saying that everyone was gone. The Emperor quickly comforted Bong-won, assuring them that their servants were safe. The Emperor quickly took Bong-won to a safe place. Seeing the wounds on Bong-won's body, the Emperor felt heartbroken and scolded Bong-won for taking such risks. Bong-won admitted it was because they were so worried. The two of them shared a deep, intense feeling. The Emperor slowly leaned in and gave Bong-won a passionate kiss. That night, the scar-faced man returned to report the news. While chasing Bong-won, he realized that the Emperor was still alive. The news that the Emperor was still alive was posted all over the city. Hwa-jin personally went and put up the notices. This news caused great concern among the high-ranking officials. A new day began, and this was the base of the rebel army. Bong-hwan thanked the leader for saving the Emperor. Now, they needed to gather their troops, but there were only 1,000 men, which wasn't enough for a direct assault. Suddenly, there was a noise from outside. It turned out the head cook had accidentally wandered into their camp. Finally, they had managed to gather their forces. Bong-won came up with an idea. The people in the palace were used to eating luxurious meals. Even if the gates were closed, they would still have to open them to let food through. Every day, over 50 carts came in and out of the imperial kitchen. They could infiltrate the palace through these carts. Before the plan began, Bong-won went to say goodbye to Byung-in. Bong-won wanted to bury Byung-in with their own hands. After all, Byung-in had done everything to protect So-young. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the Prime Minister decided to use the army to suppress the rebellion. He had also discovered that the blind servant next to the Empress was a spy. Today was the day of the coronation ceremony. The next person chosen to become king was a child, which would make it easier for the Prime Minister to control power. At the same time, Bong-hwan had seized a cart of food. They needed to disguise themselves to sneak into the palace. When they reached the city gates, they bribed the soldiers to pass the checkpoint. However, halfway through, they unexpectedly encountered the Prime Minister's men. The Prime Minister shouted for the soldiers to inspect the cart, but when they looked inside, they found nothing suspicious. The Prime Minister coldly drew his sword and stabbed into the cart, but fortunately, this cart was not carrying Bong-won. At another corner, the Emperor and Bong-won had arrived safely. They knocked out a eunuch and began to act. The Emperor returned to his room, where only one eunuch was guarding. The eunuch was terrified, thinking the Emperor was a ghost. It wasn't until Bong-won appeared that the old eunuch believed the Emperor was still alive. The two of them then prepared to go to the coronation ceremony. The soldiers finally discovered the intruders, and the Emperor charged at them. With just a few basic sword strikes, the Emperor defeated the attackers. Bong-won was no less capable, easily throwing a knife to take down one of the enemies. Just then, the sound of drums signaling the coronation began. It turned out that the ceremony had been moved up earlier than expected. The emperor was worried they might not arrive in time. However, Bong-wan reassured him, saying that preparations had already been made. It turned out that Bong-wan had arranged for someone to steal the imperial seal, which even surprised the emperor. They still had time. Meanwhile, in the prison, the emperor's guards had managed to break the lock. Just as they were finishing, a brother appeared and handed the imperial seal to the guard on duty. The two guards were shocked that he had the audacity to steal the seal. Inside the palace, chaos was unfolding. The Empress Dowager scolded the chancellor for the situation, and the chancellor too hadn't anticipated someone would dare to steal the imperial seal. News of the emperor's attack was reported, and he ordered all soldiers to gather at the palace. The chancellor then personally went out to greet them. Meanwhile, at the watchtower, a smoke bomb was unexpectedly thrown, and the smoke quickly covered the entire city gate. This was the signal that the attack had begun. The rebel army gathered and charged to attack the main gate, with the soldiers easily falling due to the smoke blurring their vision. The emperor and Bong-wan held hands and rushed into the palace. They were about to face the final boss, and this was their last chance. Suddenly, Bong-wan sensed something was wrong. On the roof above them, the scar-faced man was lying in ambush. He aimed his gun at the emperor and pulled the trigger. Fortunately, Bong-wan stepped in front of the emperor to shield him. The gunshot echoed throughout the palace. The emperor, worried, saw a wound on his hand. The scar-faced man continued shooting at the emperor. Cheoljong, in pain, collapsed to the ground. At that moment, another gunshot rang out. The emperor's guards had arrived to reinforce them. They quickly attacked the scar-faced man, who now had no place to hide. Just as he tried to draw a knife, the guards swiftly dealt with him. Meanwhile, Bong-wan's injury worsened. Suddenly, Bong-wan found himself back in the old world. He tried to hold the emperor's hand but couldn't. When he opened his eyes, he found himself lying in a hospital bed. He had finally returned. Bong-wan was worried about what had happened to the emperor. To check the result, Bong-wan needed to find a device to connect to the internet. He noticed the police officer guarding him was dozing off, and in his hand was a phone. However, just as Bong-wan was about to take it, the officer woke up. Bong-wan immediately ran out of the hospital, pursued by the police. The officers were terrified as they saw Bong-wan jump from a building. However, Bong-wan had no time to rest. He quickly ran to a bookstore to verify the information. Meanwhile, in the past, after Bong-wan's soul disappeared, So-young regained control of her body. She fearfully called the emperor awake. It turned out that they had prepared bulletproof vests in advance. At that moment, the chancellor appeared. Fortunately, So-young grabbed a hairpin and stabbed him, which helped the emperor avoid a fatal blow. The emperor quickly grabbed his sword, and the final battle began. The chancellor laughed when he saw the emperor was still alive. Seeing his carefree attitude, the emperor grew furious, knowing that the chancellor had harmed the people. As the emperor was knocked to the ground, So-young wanted to rush to help, but she couldn't. Her stomach hurt sharply because of the child inside her. The emperor summoned all his strength to attack the chancellor. With one swing, the emperor broke the chancellor's sword. Enraged, the emperor severed the chancellor's crown with a slash. The emperor could not allow him to die so easily. His punishment would be to live in shame. The emperor hurried to So-young's side. She told him that he still had something to do. Heartbroken, the emperor entrusted So-young to the care of the guards. While he had to bring an end to this battle, the emperor took the imperial seal and entered the palace. Inside, the Empress Dowager and the officials were terrified. The Empress Dowager was furious that the new emperor had been hiding in a corner. Just then, the emperor appeared, his angry face causing the officials to faint. The emperor slammed the imperial seal onto the table and ordered the child to step aside. Then, the emperor stood face to face with the Empress Dowager, saying, "Your son has come to pay his respects." Meanwhile, in So-young's palace, she remained unconscious due to excessive blood loss. The emperor anxiously asked the imperial doctor what had happened. The doctor explained that So-young was suffering from hemorrhaging, meaning she was on the brink of death. So-young's agonized scream made the emperor blame himself. Throughout that night, the emperor stood vigil by her side. Miraculously, So-young slowly opened her eyes. The doctor immediately checked her pulse, and both mother and child were safe. The emperor was deeply moved and broke down in tears. After So-young's safety was assured, the emperor began to deal with the traitors. The first to be punished was the Empress Dowager. Once So-young had recovered, she went to confront her. From now on, the Empress Dowager would be placed under house arrest. Even if she died, it would be in the palace. Her reign had come to an end. Not just the Empress Dowager, but even the crown princess was imprisoned for life. The rebels had their titles stripped and were exiled to the borders to live as slaves. No matter how much they pleaded their innocence, the emperor began to list their crimes. They were the pests that had harmed this country. The war had ended, and now So-young finally had time to visit Byung-in's grave. She still remembered the words Byung-in had said before passing away. Tears began to fall as she recalled that in the end, Byung-in had kept the vow to protect her. After Bong-wan left, So-young's mindset began to change. She gradually accepted herself and no longer felt the pressure of the struggle for power. Everyone had started a new, more positive life. Bong-wan was happy that the emperor had achieved what he wanted, and he was so moved that he cried right there in the bookstore. Just then, the police arrived. It turned out that everything in this world had changed. Bong-wan, in this world, had exposed the president's secretary to the media, and the police were here to protect him. Finally, everything had returned to its rightful course. The movie ends here. Thank you for watching our film review. We hope these insights have given you a new perspective on the film. Don't forget to like, share, and follow to stay updated on the latest reviews. Thank you, and see you next time.